In this cruel world, only one thing rules: money. Reality is torn apart by bloodthirsty creatures and the nobility, and the poor were fit only for trash, worthless carrion under the feet of the strong. And our hero, Johann, was born like this, the dregs of a poor family. The brothers, who were higher in status than him, trampled him, like trash under their feet. They bullied him and mocked him as they pleased. Poverty and humiliation choked him, but Johann held on with all his might. Day after day he toiled, sweating his brow, building his muscles and will, until the system clicked in his head, the key to true power. His head was filled with knowledge that medieval people could not even dream of. That's how the weakling and outcast began to transform into an unstoppable beast. After years of training, Johann went hunting to test his mettle. Suddenly, a girl's shrill scream pierced the silence of the forest. A pack of werewolves scented easy prey. The little girl huddled against a tree, surrounded by the hungry creatures. Johann charged into the fray with his bare hands. Blood gushed. He tore fangs, broke spines. The wolves fell, squealing in pain. The girl trembled and cried, but she was now safe. Breathing hard, Joseph turns back toward Johann. He scolds Johann for being recklessly suicidal. Yet he is also deeply moved that Johann risked himself without hesitation to save a serf child and starts to offer heartfelt thanks. Johann barely hears him because he is already fantasizing about which pelt will fetch the highest price. He checks on Dell directly, and the child tearfully thanks him for saving her. Dell suddenly freezes as if sensing a far greater terror approaching. A monstrous presence erupts behind them, drowning the forest in a crimson aura. Johann and Joseph turn in confusion, while Dell trembles in fear. A single blazing eye opens in the darkness. The true leader appears, a gigantic wolf-like monster towering over Johann and the corpses of its pack. Joseph recognizes at once that this is no beast but a monster. He begs Johann to run, insisting that something like this would require an army to defeat. Johann is startled to learn this world holds monsters too, but instead of despair he addresses the creature like a rival hunter. Facing the giant wolf, he apologizes for killing its underlings and bluntly admits he did it for the value of their pelts. The monster answers with a furious growl that shakes the clearing. Johann senses clearly that this creature sees him as prey, yet that only sharpens his resolve. The monster roars and charges with murderous intent. Johann throws himself aside, deciding that whatever it is, he still intends to profit from it. He snatches up a heavy stone in the middle of the evasive move, already plotting to preserve the hide while killing the beast. Spinning through the air, he slams the stone into the monster with explosive force. The beast staggers but quickly regains itself, proving far tougher than the others. Its wounded eye bleeds, yet the injury only enrages it further. Johann curses that he damaged the pelt and worries about the drop in value even in the middle of battle. The monster glares back with undiminished hatred and killing intent. Its howl unleashes a pressure so intense it feels like a physical shockwave. Johann clamps his hands over his ears as the roar batters his senses. Joseph shields Dell with his own body, protecting her from the monstrous sound. Johann feels something inside him falter under the assault and starts to choke on the change. He realizes with alarm that his strength is suddenly draining away. As flames and steel flash in a sudden vision of another battlefield, the moment hints at a deeper power or memory awakening within him. Overwhelmed by the roaring pressure and whatever is surfacing inside him, Johann screams as the clash reaches a new turning point. Johann comes to in the dark, dazed and clutching his head as he struggles to understand what just happened. His first thought is the monster, and panic rises as he checks whether the threat is still there. To his shock, the terrifying wolf-like presence has vanished without a trace. Looking around, he finds the people he was with merely unconscious rather than dead. Seeing Dell and Joseph breathing peacefully, he realizes everyone seems to have survived. Though he cannot explain the disappearance, he decides they must leave the forest before more monsters appear. He hoists the two of them onto his shoulders and starts the long walk back through the trees. As he trudges past the dead wolves, he regrets not taking their pelts but accepts that survival matters more. Under the moonlit forest, the night grows eerily quiet around him. When the village lights come into view, he wonders if the villagers are still out searching for Dell and briefly hopes saving the child might finally improve his standing with his father. He indulges in a ridiculous fantasy of being praised as a hero and named heir before immediately recognizing how impossible that is. More realistically, he thinks that if he is lucky, this deed might at least earn him a place among the guards and steady meals. That hopeful train of thought breaks when he notices a large gathering waiting ahead. The torchlit commotion makes it clear he is walking straight into trouble. He arrives to find armed men and villagers assembled for his father's inspection. Caught completely off guard, Johann can only stare in disbelief. His older brother Philip immediately berates him for disappearing on the very day their father came to inspect the estate. Johann suddenly remembers the inspection and realizes just how badly timed his absence was. Mounted before the crowd, his father Sergeson seethes at what he sees as Johann's insolence. The father's fury becomes physical as he dismounts with violent intent. Still carrying the rescued villagers, Johann tries to explain that unavoidable circumstances kept him away. Sergeson cuts him off at once and refuses to hear a word. Enraged at being ignored, the father threatens to split Johann's head open. Johann, exhausted from nearly dying in the forest, bitterly resents having to endure this abuse after returning alive. Instead of shrinking back, he begins to think of a way to turn the situation around. He decides he can use the rescue itself as an opportunity. So he loudly claims he missed the inspection only because he was saving people from the forest. The mention of Dell jolts the crowd, especially those who had feared the child was dead. Dell's father rushes in, overwhelmed with relief that his daughter is safe after searching everywhere for her. Tearful and grateful, the man clutches Dell and thanks heaven she survived. Johann seizes the moment and declares that Dell had been surrounded by man-eating wolves, which he fought off to save her. He admits he missed the inspection but insists that protecting the estate's people was the true duty of a knight's son. Then he bows deeply and asks to be forgiven this once, promising to keep serving the estate's safety. Pushing his luck, he even asks to be appointed guard captain, which makes Philip choke in disbelief. Johann congratulates himself internally for what he thinks is a perfect performance. Sergeson answers with mocking contempt and demands proof that any wolves ever existed. Johann's confidence falters as he realizes he has no evidence at all. Desperate, he insists he is telling the truth and blurts out that he even encountered the great dark wolf. That claim startles the listeners, who know the name carries ominous weight. But to Sergeson it is only one more outrageous lie. He roars that Johann has lied to his face and threatens him again with brutal violence. Johann, cornered and angry, asks if his father wants a duel and says he will prove himself that way. He hates the idea of fighting his own father, yet decides he has no other choice left. Sergeson accepts immediately, eager to humiliate him in front of everyone. The father orders Johann to raise his sword and declares they will duel with weapons alone. Johann freezes because the condition exposes the one thing he never learned. Inside, he rages that the man now demanding swordsmanship is the same father who never taught him how to wield a weapon. The duel ground opens around them as Sergeson commands Johann to draw his blade. Johann awkwardly unsheathes his sword and instantly realizes how wrong this is. Seeing his son's incompetence, Sergeson contemptuously orders Philip to lend Johann a proper weapon. Philip quietly urges Johann to beg forgiveness, warning that it is the only way he will survive. Johann refuses because he believes he did nothing wrong and insists a man should not run away. He tells Philip to step aside and resolves to learn something from the duel itself. Sergeson answers with a dismissive snort, already certain of the outcome. Johann steels himself, convinced that if he displays enough skill before the crowd, even his father will finally have to acknowledge him. He launches forward with a reckless shout, trying to seize the initiative. Sergeson is briefly surprised by the sudden charge. For an instant, the father senses a monstrous pressure in Johann's attack and is unsettled by it. That frightening impression flashes through the clash as Johann's strike comes down. Johann's blade slams into Sergeson's ornate axe instead of breaking through. The impact destroys Johann's sword, shattering it in a single exchange. The broken recoil and counterforce slash Johann across the forehead, and leave him reeling and bleeding. Pain and sparks fill his vision as the duel turns against him instantly. Sergeson plants his foot and regains full control of the fight. He begins to speak with murderous certainty, no longer treating Johann as a son. Calling him a parasite, Sergeson swings with the intent to kill. Johann barely jerks back as the lethal arc whistles past his face. The crowd realizes in horror that this is no lesson or punishment but a genuine attempt at murder. While pressing the attack, Sergeson reveals why he never trained Johann. He always believed the boy would remain worthless anyway. He keeps cutting at him while declaring that no matter how hard Johann tries, he will never surpass him. Then his rant widens into naked obsession as he screams that the estate belongs to him alone and that no one, not even the emperor, will take it away. Bleeding and dodging, Johann is stunned by how unhinged his father sounds but forces himself to focus on surviving. Half blinded by blood, he realizes he can barely see and that his situation is rapidly becoming hopeless. Philip shouts Johann's name in alarm as the duel spirals further out of control. Johann turns toward the voice for a split second, confused by the interruption. That moment of distraction lets Sergeson drive the axe in close against Johann's face. The watching villagers gasp, convinced Johann is about to die. Johann desperately catches the axe with the broken remains of his sword and his bare strength. He strains against the weapon, but the shattered blade cannot hold for long. As the fragments give way, Johann realizes with cold clarity that he has lost. He drops to his knees amid the broken pieces, defeated and exposed before his father. Sergeson looms over him and coldly orders him to remember his place. Before leaving, he promises that if Johann ever crosses his sight again, he truly will cave in his skull. He turns his back and walks away, leaving Johann kneeling in blood and humiliation. A ring of villagers closes around the ruined duel ground, and someone timidly addresses Johann with pity. Later, the village church becomes the place where outrage over Sergeson's cruelty is finally spoken aloud. Inside, Father Valberg worries about being overheard, but the visiting priest from the Vatican refuses to stay quiet. The priest angrily insists that a knight should have honor, and condemns the way Sergeson treated his own son. Bandaged and exhausted, Johann brushes it off with a weak smile, saying that at least he survived. The priest keeps fuming that the duel was absurd because Sergeson fought in full armor against his own untrained son. Johann's expression darkens as the reality of his weakness sinks in. He admits to himself that this world is harsher than he wanted to believe, because he knew he lacked training but not that he was this powerless. Father Valberg gently explains that Sergeson is a veteran who inherited family techniques and battle experience, so Johan's defeat was only natural. To illustrate the gap, he mentions another knight who supposedly slaughtered 300 serf soldiers alone, astonishing Johan. Johan bitterly concludes that superior equipment and training matter more than he had assumed, especially after his own father crushed him so easily. That mention of the Black Wolf suddenly catches the priest's full attention. He urgently asks Johan whether he truly saw a black wolf in the forest. Johan, confused by the intensity, confirms it and adds that Joseph and Del saw it too. The priest reacts with alarm and prayer, which only confuses Johan further. Without answering directly, the priest pulls a heavy old book from the shelf. He opens it and explains that black wolves have long been treated as taboo creatures. The book shows a grim image of a wolf devouring a child, making the warning feel less like folklore and more like doctrine. According to the priest, he says, black wolves are omens of death. Old stories claim that wherever black wolves appear, bloodshed and disaster follow. Johan listens in uneasy silence as the idea begins to settle in his mind. Though he says he does not believe in superstition, he cannot help wondering whether the wolf foretold his duel with his father. The priest tries to reassure him by saying such tales are only old stories. He adds that perhaps God is helping Johan because he is the kind of person who puts others before himself. Johan can only stare, baffled at being described as genuinely good. Left alone with the thought, he wonders if they really mean him, since all he ever wanted was money and a better life. Elsewhere, the story shifts to the neighboring Brits barony. There, amid fire and chaos, desperate screams for help and mercy fill the night. A terrified mother clutches her child on the floor and begs for their lives. A bloodied blade swings toward them without hesitation. The strike lands in a spray of blood, ending their pleas. A lifeless hand falls to the ground as the massacre continues. Nearby armored killers casually discuss how pointless it is for victims to run when death is certain either way. One of them remarks with detached amusement that the slaughter is cruel. Another notes they are killing everyone in the estate and burning the bodies, only to dismiss any moral concern. To them it is simply work to be done in exchange for gold. At the burning gate, a towering black armored commander stands while a subordinate kneels before him. The subordinate reports that the mercenaries have finished cleaning up and presents the Brits family seal ring. The commander takes the ring, confirming the house has fallen. He closes his fist around it with cold satisfaction. The masked leader, Sir Karamov, speaks the name Brits as if measuring a disappointment. He says he expected more from a man rumored to have killed 300 soldiers alone, but dismisses him as unworthy after he failed to survive even 2 attacks. Karamov identifies himself as the sword of the Holy Empire and the Emperor's proxy. As the recollector of seals, he proclaims his authority to punish corrupt nobles in the Emperor's name. He promises limitless gold and honor to all who stand with the Emperor. Then he gives the true order behind the reward: kill, rob, and burn everything. With the Brits' estate destroyed, he declares that the Eighth's estate will be next. The attack force surges forward through the flames toward its next target. Karamov himself meets resistance head-on, his monstrous armor and red gaze cutting through the firelight. He cleaves through an opponent with overwhelming force. Another desperate strike glances off his helmet, barely slowing him. He answers with a brutal counter that tears through the defender's weapon and body alike. A helmet spins away as the victim is cut down. Blood sprays across the darkness while Karamov's advance remains unstoppable. The severed helmet clatters across the stone floor and rolls to a stop. Inside it, the dying face of the fallen knight is briefly revealed. His final expression freezes in terror as death overtakes him. Back at the Eighth's estate, Johan jolts awake from the nightmare in a cold sweat. He sits upright in his room, shaken, and wonders if what he saw was only a dream. Holding his head, he feels the lingering dread refuse to fade. He admits to himself that ever since seeing the Black Wolf, he has been haunted by the same nightmare night after night. The priest's warning echoes in his memory that since ancient times the Black Wolf has been feared as an omen of misfortune. That memory continues with the image of the beast under a blood-red moon, tied to the belief that its very existence heralds disaster. Johan recalls the explanation that the creature spreads bloodshed in every direction and brings death to others. The phrase sign of death lingers in his mind and leaves him deeply unsettled. Even as he laughs off the superstition and insists he never did anything to the Black Wolf, the image of the grinning shadow behind him makes his denial ring hollow. Johan's reckless strength is introduced as he smashes through a target with absurd force while trying to act casual about it. He awkwardly admits he threw a rock at something, and not just any rock but an enormous one. Deciding panic is useless, he forces himself to stop dwelling on consequences and return to training. At sunset on a lonely hill, Johan continues his harsh routine in the wilderness. His training is interrupted when someone calls him a worthless brat, making him turn toward the insult. 2 ranked brothers mock him with their father's warning that standing out is the same as inviting death. They keep taunting him as a beaten dog pretending to be tough, dismissing his endless woodcutting as meaningless. The brothers sneer that breaking logs is a cheap trick and that someone of low birth could never possess real strength. When Johan's ambition to join the guard is mocked, they insist their father would never raise trash like him and would sooner kill him. Johan answers their contempt by driving his wrapped fist into the tree with ominous restraint. His anger explodes into a devastating blow that tears through the trunk with shocking power. The brothers are left gaping in disbelief as the scale of his strength finally registers. Johann finishes the tree off in a storm of strikes, reducing it to splintered ruin before their eyes. Turning with a dark grin, he invites his brothers to repeat their insults from a little closer. Their courage vanishes at once, and they flee while threatening to report everything to their father. Watching them run, Johann can only marvel at how people so foolish manage to survive at all. He dismisses their future and returns his attention to his own training. Yet he quietly admits that one part of their mockery was true. Philip arrives and bluntly confirms that their father has no intention of granting Johann any official position. Johann takes the rejection with a bitter smile, noting that at least he was not killed over it. When Philip asks if he is disappointed, Johann shrugs it off and says he will simply find another way to live. Philip then reveals the real reason behind their father's refusal, saying the Lord fears Johann. Johann falls silent, stunned by the idea that fear rather than contempt may be guiding his father. Philip explains that Johann's undeniable strength makes him a threat to the man who rules the estate. Unlike Philip, who survives by obedience, Johann insists on living by his own principles, and that makes him dangerous. Their father believes Johann could one day seize everything from him just as he once overthrew his own father to take power. Johann rejects the idea as absurd, unable to take such paranoia seriously. Ignoring his disbelief, Philip orders a servant to bring over a sack he had prepared. The servant opens the bag at Philip's command. Johann is caught off guard, unsure what Philip is showing him. Inside are a plain surcoat, a longsword of unknown origin, and spare armor that had been hidden away in the castle. Philip notes that these are the things Johann has been eyeing for a long time, making him flinch at being read so easily. Philip tells him plainly that he is not like their father and would not discard someone capable. He promises that when he becomes lord, he will appoint Johann as captain of the 8th Guard. Until that day, Philip urges him to keep training and stop stirring up trouble. Johann immediately protests that he never starts trouble, only finishes what others begin. Philip leaves with a dismissive gesture, ending the conversation on his own terms. As Philip and the servant walk away, Johann remains alone with the gift and the fading light. One of the brothers watches in shaken silence, unable to process what just happened. Johann stares at the armor and realizes it is the very set he saw in his ominous dream. He wonders if wearing it will lead him to the same death he foresaw, and the thought chills him. Even so, some instinct tells him that this fate might be something he can overcome. Though he has no proof, he chooses to trust that feeling. Reasoning that he will need proper equipment to win whatever lies ahead, he decides to put the gear on. As night falls, laughter rises from the village tavern nearby. Inside the tavern, villagers argue loudly over an unbelievable story someone insists is true. They praise Sir Johann as a righteous knight who killed wolves, ignored profit, and drew his sword only to save common folk. The praise quickly turns into open contempt for Lord Gisson, whom they call less knightly than Johann and wish dead already. Their drunken talk grows bolder as they joke that Johann should have taken Gisson's head that day. They even dismiss blood ties, saying being Gisson's son should not have stopped Johann from killing him. One villager suddenly offers drinks for everyone, celebrating with reckless generosity. He reveals the reason for the feast. Johann saved his daughter Dell, so the whole tavern toasts the righteous knight. Amid the celebration, a villager notices a hooded stranger and asks who he is, certain he is not local. The stranger answers with a sinister laugh and notes how carelessly these villagers slander their lord before someone they do not know. The men sober instantly as the stranger's presence turns the room cold with fear. Rather than punish them immediately, the hooded man says Johann's story interests him. He demands that they keep talking, and terror grips the villagers. What he wants to hear is everything they know about Johann Eitz. Later that night, Johann wanders the village in his new gear, humming to himself in a rare good mood. He happily imagines Philip truly making him captain one day and sees a bright future opening before him. His daydream breaks when he notices something unusual ahead. Spotting a collapsed drunk, he decides that a future captain cannot ignore a citizen in trouble. He cheerfully offers to escort the man home before he catches cold. As he leans in, Johann senses a sudden unnatural chill and realizes something is wrong. A hidden blade flashes to his throat from behind, freezing him in place. Shock gives way to panic as he realizes he has walked straight into an assassination attempt. The quiet village around them offers no help as the trap closes in. Johann stiffens under the knife, barely able to breathe. He frantically tries to guess who sent the assassin, first suspecting Gisson and then rejecting that idea. His thoughts jump to other enemies, even Philip, but uncertainty only deepens his fear. Unable to identify the mastermind, Johann realizes he may die without even understanding why. Forced to speak carefully, he asks the assassin what he wants. Thinking it might be a robbery, Johann offers everything he has if he is allowed to live. The assassin dismisses money, saying he already has more than enough. That answer terrifies Johann even more, because a man who does not want money must want something worse. The assassin finally names Johann and says he has only one question to ask him. He warns that if Johann's answer displeases him, he will cut his throat on the spot. To prove the threat is real, he presses the blade until blood beads at Johann's neck. Johann is horrified that his life now depends on answering some insane stranger correctly. He forces himself to focus, treating the ordeal like a deadly interview he has to pass perfectly. The assassin tells him the questioning will begin, and Johann braces himself. A single glowing eye peers from the hood as the stranger studies him. The question is bizarre. With Johann's body and strength, how can he truly be Gissen's son? Johann is dumbfounded that this absurd bloodline question is what decides whether he lives or dies. Desperate for the right answer, he scrambles for something that might satisfy a man. He finally blurts out that sometimes a lion can be born from a pig's bloodline. The assassin goes silent, giving no hint whether Johann has saved himself or doomed himself. That silence terrifies Johann more than the blade, and he wonders if he answered wrong. The hooded man lowers his head as if weighing the words. Then he erupts into wild laughter, startling Johann completely. Still laughing, he declares that Johann's answer pleases him, only to refuse his release anyway. Instead, the assassin reveals his scarred face and claims Johann for himself. Johann can only stare, unable to understand what being claimed by this lunatic is supposed to mean. The narration identifies the man as Kegel, the Empire's greatest assassin and the poison master of the Niso's guild. Through countless killings he perfected a serpent-like sword style and became feared as the venom serpent. Yet even Kegel had one frustration. He could not find anyone worthy to inherit his art. He searched everywhere, even among assassins, but found only worthless candidates who could never succeed him. A few showed promise, but none could endure what he demanded. One proud heir refused to learn an assassin's craft and chose death over dishonor. Kegel granted that wish without hesitation, cutting him down where he stood. Dozens of heirs from knightly families died the same way, clinging to honor until Kegel finally sought supernatural guidance. He went to the Empire's witch, who greeted the venom serpent as a man who grants peaceful deaths. The witch prophesied that the disciple he sought lived in Eight's castle and was one of Lord Gissen's sons. Kegel doubted that such a backwater could hold his successor, but the prophecy was too specific to ignore. The witch offered to return his payment if he disliked the prophecy, but Kegel chose to trust it. He accepted her words, deciding he would rather risk belief than waste more years searching. Because he wanted the prophecy to be true and knew his own time was running out, he came to Eight's. Even after arriving, however, Kegel still doubted that anyone worthy could really be found there. He resolved that if the boy disappointed him, he would kill him immediately. So he introduced himself to Johann as Kegel, guild master of the Niso's guild, and announced that Johann would become his successor. He gave Johann only two choices: die by his hand or inherit his swordsmanship. Johann, still processing the threat, asks a stunned question of his own. Rather than refuse or accept on principle, he asks how much he would have to pay to learn such swordsmanship. Kegel is genuinely thrown off, because no one has ever responded to his ultimatum by trying to buy lessons. Johann's mind races with the realization that a legendary guild master is offering personal instruction. When he understands that the training would be free, greed and joy overwhelm every other concern. He instantly calls Kegel master, and gushes that he has waited his whole life for someone like him. Kegel, baffled, reminds him that this is assassin swordsmanship, not some noble art. He warns that merely learning it would disgrace Johann and stain any knightly family forever. Johann shouts that he does not care about honor or shame at all and begs to be taught. Faced with a reaction unlike any he has ever seen, Kegel finally agrees. Johann immediately follows up with another shameless question for his new master. Since Kegel claimed to have plenty of money, Johann asks whether good performance will earn him an allowance. Kegel can only conclude that this brat is unlike anyone he has ever met. Back at Eight's castle, Lord Gissen departs after an inspection while Philip and the lady of the house see him off. Gissen announces he will be away for a while, leaving the estate behind. Philip formally promises to manage the castle in his father's absence. The lady quietly needles Philip, and the tension between them crackles even in this polite farewell. Behind her fan, she vows that no matter what happens, the castle will become hers. Philip rejects that ambition outright and insists that he alone will be the next Lord of Eight's. Fed up with both of them, Gissen snaps that he is tired of their endless bickering and tells them to do whatever they want. Philip then brings up Johann's failure to return and asks what should be done about him. Gissen barely reacts, showing how little Johann matters to him. Philip is startled by the sudden harshness of his father's response. Gissen coldly says Johann is not worth his time, and that the weakling's death means nothing to him. Philip bows and accepts the order, though the lady seems quietly amused by the cruelty. Even as he obeys, Philip cannot stop wondering where Johann is and what he is doing at that very moment. At the same time in the forest near Eight's, Kegel decides to test Johann's actual ability, and Johann sheepishly asks to borrow a sword because he breaks his own so often. Kegel hands him one, still unsure whether this absurd disciple is worth anything. As Johann takes the weapon, Kegel thinks the brat is reckless, irritating, and lacking every quality he respects. He even considers killing Johann on the spot, but instead draws his blade and asks if he is ready. Johann answers with eager enthusiasm, thrilled rather than intimidated by the test. The two face each other, and Kegel is immediately disturbed by Johann's bizarre, untrained stance. Convinced this cannot be the posture of a true knight's son, Kegel decides the boy may deserve death, after all. Johann casually asks whether he must use proper swordsmanship, or if he can fight however he likes. Kegel tells him to use anything at all, because the method does not matter. The instant he hears that, Johann launches forward with a savage, unconventional strike. His attack detonates with explosive force the moment their weapons meet. Kegel stares in shock as his own blade shatters into flying fragments. In that instant, Kegel finally realizes he may truly have found the successor he had been seeking. The old swordsman realizes his doubts about Johan's talent were completely misplaced. Staring in shock, he finally understands the brat he underestimated is no ordinary fighter. Johan charges in with a grin, and the master is forced to admit his strength is monstrous. Even the air around them seems to split under the force Johan unleashes. A single punch creates crushing pressure, making the master realize Johan's raw power alone is terrifying. He judges that if that blow lands directly, Johan would pulverize flesh, bone, and muscle alike. To him, Johan no longer feels human but like a lion bearing down on prey. Johan presses forward with feral intensity, throwing everything into the attack. Yet at the last instant the master calmly shifts his grip and changes the exchange. Using erratic footwork and a serpent-like path, he slips around Johan's line of attack. Johan cannot read the movement at all and loses track of where his opponent is going. The master's sheath blade crashes into Johan before he can react. Johan is sent sprawling while the master remains standing over him in control. The clearing falls quiet as Johan struggles up and the master watches in silence. The master remarks that even after being struck with the flat of the blade, Johan still did not pass out, which only proves how absurd he is. He tells Johan that in another age such power would have made him a legendary hero, but praise gives way to warning as the master says Johan carries a fatal weakness. He bluntly states that if Johan continues like this, his own strength will kill him. Johan, stunned, asks what it means for his power to kill him. The master explains that Johan cannot control his strength, and that lack of control is what will destroy him. Johan rejects the idea at first, insisting he is not foolish enough to attack himself. In response, the master draws attention to Johan's sword and the way he uses it. Confident in his point, the master invites Johan to attack again if he truly believes otherwise. He even wagers gold if Johan can break the master's sword before destroying his own. The promise of gold instantly hijacks Johan's attention and enthusiasm. Driven by greed as much as pride, Johan rushes in and demands the master keep that promise. He swings with full force, committing everything to the strike. The master meets the blow head-on with his own weapon. The clash erupts in a burst of force and fragments. Johan is jolted by the impact and coughs as the exchange turns against him. Shards scatter across the ground as the result becomes clear. Johan freezes when he realizes something has gone wrong again. The broken blade reminds him of the same failure he suffered when fighting his father. The master tells him he has now seen the truth, that he lost to his own strength rather than to his opponent. He orders Johan to learn control or die, forcing the lesson into him without mercy. Johan notices a fragment lodged in his armor and realizes the master deliberately sent it there to prove the point. He finally accepts that he must master restraint if he wants to survive and still chase his future. The master adds that once Johan can restrain his power, feats that seem impossible will become natural. To demonstrate, he attacks again while Johan braces with his sword. The sheath strike slices into Johan's armor with precise force. Johan is stunned that the master cut through armor using only the scabbard. The master explains that true control lets one cut anything, even without a drawn blade. He says that if Johan ever gains proper mastery over his power, his future strength will be beyond imagining. Johan decides that is enough proof and asks to begin training immediately. The master warns that the training will be brutal and may kill him, then asks if he is prepared. Johan answers without hesitation that he is ready. Time passes, and the story shifts from the forest to the lands around House 8's. Johan returns to the village after enduring harsh training. He looks battered and exhausted, carrying the wear of repeated beatings. Though he has started learning how to hold back enough not to break his sword, he complains that the process is miserable and still not real swordsmanship. His thoughts are interrupted when he notices an unusual commotion ahead. He sees armed elves gathered at the gate, and realizes outsiders have occupied the entrance. When he questions them, they order him away and declare the area restricted. Johan immediately bristles at being commanded around on his own land. With a mocking smile, one of them asks if he even knows who they are. They reveal themselves as the Wolves of ActionToon, imperial mercenaries directly tied to the Emperor. Instead of being intimidated, Johan lights up at the thought of mercenary work and asks about the pay. The mercenaries laugh and tell him their earnings far exceed those of a mere guard captain, boasting of 2 gold coins for a single job. They size Johan up, joke that muscle only makes him a bigger target, and insist skill matters more than strength. Johan is dazzled by the mention of gold and briefly wonders if mercenary life is the better career. Watching from behind, a golden-armored knight finds the scene absurdly amusing. That knight's presence floods the area with a violent aura that instantly changes the mood. Johan's eye widens as he senses a danger unlike anything around the mercenaries. His hand moves toward his sword before he consciously decides to act. In his mind, blades seem to close in from every side as instinct screams at him to defend himself. He is startled by his own reaction and wonders why he almost drew without thinking. A blonde knight trainee snaps at him for the disrespect and threatens to behead him for daring to reach for his sword before Sir Karamov. Karamov stops the outburst with a single calm gesture. Then, from atop his horse, the Golden Knight turns his attention directly to Johan and asks who he is. Johann swallows his fear and forces himself to answer. Surrounded by drawn blades, he nervously introduces himself as Johann of House 8. Karamov removes his helmet to reveal the face behind the armor. The golden shell opens, exposing a composed and striking elf beneath it. He is identified as Karamov, one of the Holy Empire's Emperor's Guard Knights. Johann realizes with alarm that he reached for his sword without any conscious intent. His hand hovers near the hilt as he replays the moment in his mind. He admits to himself that even past brushes with death never made him feel this overwhelmed. Karamov's murderous intent presses down so heavily that Johann can barely breathe. To Johann, it feels like standing before a monstrous predator far above him. He understands himself as prey placed directly in front of an apex hunter. Karamov coldly tells him to move because he is in the way. Johann remains frozen, still trapped by fear and pressure. A sudden realization jolts through him as he struggles to regain himself. The mercenaries laugh at how visibly terrified he is. They mock him further and joke that there may not even be a next time for someone this scared. Jane, a knight in training accompanying Karamov, asks whether they can simply leave Johann there. Karamov says he would rather avoid causing a scene on such a pleasant day. As the Imperial group heads inside, Johann watches and wonders why a knight of the Emperor would come to House 8 at all. The question lingers as he stares after them, unable to shake his unease. Inside the castle, Philip 8 hurries forward in shock at Karamov's arrival. He runs through the halls, baffled that such an exalted figure would visit a place like this. Philip introduces himself as the next Lord of House 8 and anxiously asks Karamov's purpose. Before Philip can control the meeting, Johann's mother sweeps in, flatters Karamov shamelessly, and presents young John as the true future lord. She openly flirts with Karamov and tries to draw him deeper into her side of the household. Karamov ignores her attempts and keeps moving, leaving her calling after him. Philip can only watch in tense silence as his authority slips away. Karamov reaches for his helmet again, as if settling into a more serious mood. The scene shifts to a darker image of him seated in power, as he demands to know where Gissin is. The household is left startled and uneasy by the blunt question. Philip tries to defend protocol, saying even Karamov should not address Lord Gissin so casually. Johann's mother immediately overrules him, insisting the Empire's greatest knight may speak however he pleases and claiming the right to host him herself. Philip realizes she is exploiting Karamov's visit to strengthen John's claim as heir. Back in the forest, the master smacks Johann for speaking carelessly during training. He orders Johann to stop worrying about suspicion and focus on what he can actually do. The old man resumes the lesson with another punishing strike from the scabbard. He warns that until Gissin arrives, Karamov intends to remain inside the castle. That means the threat will not pass quickly, and Johann has little time to prepare. Under the moonlit sky, the training continues without pause. Johann and his master clash again in a rapid exchange of steel and scabbard. The memory of Karamov's presence keeps intruding on Johann's concentration. Karamov's face and Johann's fear overlap in his mind, distracting him mid-fight. The master strikes him and roars that he is a fool for losing focus. He orders Johann to concentrate completely on the fight in front of him. Another blow flashes in before Johann can fully recover. Johann barely avoids the attack and is driven back, frustrated and hurting. He notices blood at his neck and realizes how close that mistake came to killing him. The master reminds him that poison daggers would have ended him already and demands to know why his mind is wandering. Johann admits that knights claiming to be the Emperor's personal guard recently came to the village and that the whole situation feels wrong. He points out that this is 8's territory, so even Imperial knights should not be able to shut the gates and control access so freely. To him, the behavior makes no sense and confirms something suspicious is happening. The master answers that suspicion alone means nothing if Johann lacks the power to act on it. He explains that Karamov is the Emperor's direct knight, the strongest warrior on the continent, and even his armor is legendary. Johann asks the question that matters most to him, whether Karamov is stronger than his master. The old man falls silent, and that silence says enough. He finally admits that if he ever had to face Karamov, he would turn and run without hesitation. When Johann tries to argue that a fight's outcome is never certain, the master cuts him off with another blow and orders him to shut up. He berates Johann for speaking beyond his station when he still cannot even control himself. The master drives the point deeper, calling him an ignorant brat who does not know the first thing about swordsmanship. Instead of shrinking back, Johann grips his sword and declares that he will learn. The master accepts the challenge and tells him to come. They launch into another fierce exchange across the clearing. Johann attacks again and again, refusing to stop despite the punishment. He keeps pressing forward, turning each failure into another attempt. The master batters him repeatedly, but Johann still rises into the next strike. At last the master commands him to do it again, forcing repetition until instinct changes. Johann swings while wondering why the technique still is not working. He knows the weapon is only a scabbard, yet he still cannot make it cut as the master does. The master explains that the answer lies in sensing the flow of strength. He tells Johann not to swing blindly but to gather that flow and concentrate it at the very tip. As Johann swings once more, he begins to grasp what it truly means to control his power. The master notices with alarm that Johann's dull strikes are starting to gain a sharp edge. Johann's attacks suddenly carve cleaner arcs, forcing the master to defend in earnest. Johann realizes this is the moment, and that everything he has learned must now be tempered together. He adjusts his grip and commits only the exact amount of strength needed. The master senses the change immediately and understands Johann has crossed into dangerous territory. For the first time, he fears the brat may actually succeed. Johann releases the strike, and a dragon-like surge of concentrated force erupts from the blade's path. A brilliant line of power tears through the darkness. The master stares in shock as Johann's scabbard splits cleanly under the sharpened flow. Johann breaks into delighted disbelief, realizing at last that he actually cut it. Johann exults that he has finally grasped the feel of the sword and boasts that mastering it was easy. His old master answers with silence and bitterly suspects the boy's success was mere luck. When the master calls his name, Johann turns back with cheerful confidence, expecting more instruction. Instead, the master warns that he will stop holding back and orders Johann to attack again. Johann answers with a sudden, monstrous sword technique that takes the form of a serpent and shocks the old assassin. The strike lands with overwhelming force, blasting the master backward and shattering his defense. Johann celebrates another victory while the master crouches in stunned silence. The old man realizes in disbelief that this reckless brat has become something abnormal. He is shaken that Johann can freely use the secret technique Serpent's Tongue despite never being taught it. Worse, he understands the boy perfectly copied a move he had only glimpsed once on their first day together. As his broken weapon lies beside him, the master admits Johann now uses the technique even better than he does. Faced with that truth, the old assassin falls into grim, speechless acceptance. His experience tells him that unless a miracle happens, Johann has already become an opponent he can no longer defeat. Kegel, guild master of the Empire's deadliest assassination guild Poison of Nisos, quietly acknowledges the fact. Even while calling Johann absurd, he hears the boy happily treating this breakthrough like a ticket to an easier life. Kegel abruptly declares that his teachings end here and that he will leave at sunrise. Johann protests that all he did was get used to the sword, but Kegel replies that he already has everything he needs. Reluctantly, the master admits Johann surpassed him in less than a week. Satisfied that his swordsmanship will live on through Johann, Kegel tells him to live however he wishes. He addresses him formally as Johann Eitz and praises the effort he has shown until now. Later by the campfire, Johann asks if the master is truly leaving, and Kegel says wandering is simply his nature, not just an assassin's habit. Johann then asks about ominous signs, specifically the black wolf, and Kegel confirms he knows of it. Johann recalls recently encountering that black wolf omen himself. He explains that afterward he dreamed of being beheaded, so when Kegel first came for his life he mistook him for the omen made real. Kegel answers that if he had killed Johann then the omen would have belonged to Johann, because ill fortune does not come in only one form. Before departing, Kegel offers one last piece of practical advice. First, he tells Johann to find a weapon suited to his strength, warning that ordinary steel cannot withstand his power, and that he would need Danu's steel. He explains that Danu's steel is a legendary magic-infused metal known only through rare relics. Since its forging method was lost, and it can only be mined from ancient ruins, weapons made from it are extraordinarily scarce. When Johann asks if that means it must be expensive, Kegel says a lifetime of savings would still not buy it, and money alone may not secure it at all. Pressed on why he recommended something impossible, Kegel clarifies that Johann simply needs a weapon appropriate to his circumstances, then grumbles at being accused of assassin-like scheming again. He adds that Danu's is recognizable by its unusual color, and warns Johann that if he ever sees someone wearing it, even from afar, he must flee. Kegel's warning is blunt: do not look back, just run. He stresses that anyone who does not know their limits will not live long, and Johann quietly accepts the lesson. As he rises to leave, Kegel tells Johann to carve his next words into his bones. His creed is simple: never fight an enemy you cannot beat, run from danger, and if forced to fight, use any means necessary and kill without fail. He promises that if Johann follows that rule, he will probably survive. Then, in a rare moment of sincerity, Kegel tells him not to die. Johann watches his master disappear down the forest road, carrying those words with him. The lesson echoes in his mind as a rule for life: run from danger, kill what cannot be avoided, and above all survive. Johann swears to remember those words and silently honors his departing master. At that same time, events are already moving elsewhere at Eight's castle. Inside the castle, someone politely asks whether the wine suits their guest's taste. The guest, a pale elf in ornate golden armor, dismisses the drink as foul and orders it removed. The serving woman only teases that such an expensive drink being rejected is a pity. The elf remarks that only the liquor in Lord Gison's bedroom surpasses it, revealing a vulgar familiarity with the household. The woman coyly invites him to move to a more comfortable bedroom instead of lingering here. She specifically suggests Lord Gison's bedroom and promises he will not be disappointed. Blushing, she hints that the two of them could enjoy themselves there alone. The elf cuts through the flirtation with a cold command for her to stop. She immediately shifts tone, addresses him as Sir Karamov, and reports that Lord Gison will arrive late tonight so the reception should begin without delay. At that, Karamov's eyes sharpen with predatory intent. Bored with waiting, he decides he may as well amuse himself in the meantime. A burst of blood follows as he begins that amusement without warning. Smiling over the slaughter, he calls this kind of killing his entertainment. Outside the chamber, a servant hears the carnage and recoils in horror behind the door. Far away, Johann senses something wrong and stops in the road under a sky lit by fire. He stares ahead in alarm, unable to understand what he is seeing. From the hill he realizes the village below is burning. At the same time, riders approaching the estate are shocked to see smoke rising from its lands. A terrified attendant admits he does not know what happened and urges his lord to return immediately because the blaze is massive. The horse surges forward as the party rushes toward the disaster. They crash through the gate into the estate at full speed. From inside, mocking guards sneer that their master only appears after the fun has started and insult him for being slow and useless. They add that Sir Karamov is not a patient man, making clear who has taken control. The returning lord freezes as the implication hits him. He enters a courtyard strewn with butchered bodies, surrounded by imperial soldiers. The dead include commoners and servants, their severed heads left in pools of blood. Gissin can barely comprehend the massacre unfolding before him. Karamov steps into view and stamps his dominance into the scene. He greets Gissin with contempt, accusing him of arriving late. Gissin reaches for his weapon and demands to know what Karamov is doing. Karamov answers the outrage with a brutal strike that silences him. He formally declares Gissin guilty of attempting to assassinate the emperor and of high treason, and announces that House 8 will be eradicated by imperial order. Gissin protests that this is nothing but a purge disguised as justice, and that the charges are fabricated to execute him. Still refusing to submit, he tries to resist Karamov's decree. Karamov calmly orders the horn sounded. He commands his men to seize the 8th family seal, purge everyone in the territory, and erase the land itself from the map. The soldiers obey at once and sound the signal. The horn unleashes the purge as imperial troops surge forward like a hunting pack. Soon the village is fully engulfed, with homes collapsing into a sea of fire. One soldier mocks a kneeling priest for the cruelty of the man behind this massacre. With a sword at Father Valberg's throat, the soldier demands to know where Gissin's bastard son is hiding and threatens to send the priest to his god. Johann suddenly intervenes, striking from behind before the priest can be killed. He cuts the attacker down in a single decisive slash. Father Valberg stares up in shock as the blade that should have killed him stops short. Recognizing Johann, the priest calls out to him in disbelief. Johann demands an explanation, and Valberg tells him the imperial troops are slaughtering villagers on sight. The priest adds that Lord Gissin may already be dead as well. The possibility that even his father is gone leaves Johann stunned. Valberg explains that the entire village is being burned to erase all evidence, while Johann realizes he must get back to the castle immediately. As he turns, another voice catches his attention through the roar of the flames. He starts walking toward it, and the priest anxiously calls after him. Johann finds a crying little girl named Dell hiding among the ruins and calls to her gently. Relieved she is alive, he tells her she is safe and urges her to come to him because the area is dangerous. Then he senses a new threat an instant too late. Dell's father, already riddled with arrows, staggers in front of her and dies trying to protect her one last time. Johann is left frozen by the sudden death at his feet. The sight triggers a flood of memories of the villagers as they once were, alive, kind, and ordinary. He turns from the corpse, shaken by the weight of what has been lost. He remembers the villagers' warm faces and simple happiness. That memory collides with the reality of their burned and broken bodies. He recalls their laughter and shared drink, the life that filled this place before the purge. Now only corpses remain where that life once stood. Johann bites back his grief as anger begins to harden inside him. Dell clings to him in terror, forcing him back to the immediate need to protect someone still living. He kneels, tells her to stay with Father Valberg because it is too dangerous to be alone, and she tearfully agrees. Then Johann turns away with sword in hand and heads deeper into the burning village despite Dell begging him to stop. Father Valberg desperately warns that Johann must not do this and should flee instead. Johann halts for a beat, caught between fear and resolve. What he sees next ends that hesitation. Gissin's severed head has been raised on a banner pole. The dead duke's face hangs there as proof that the purge has already claimed him. A proclamation beneath it declares Duke Gissin VIII executed for treason against the emperor. The notice further warns that anyone who retrieves his body without permission will be punished as a traitor as well, under Karamov's authority. An imperial soldier notices Johann lingering by the display and recognizes him as Gissin's bastard son. The soldiers taunt him for returning instead of running and ask whether he came back just to die. Johann answers with action, launching himself into them before they can finish speaking. The imperial banner drops to the ground as his attack tears through their formation. He tramples the fallen standard underfoot, rejecting the empire's judgment. The surviving soldiers panic and shout for everyone to kill him immediately. Johann's expression turns cold and murderous as he commits himself fully. His first slash opens one soldier from shoulder to torso. A second cut follows instantly, carving through another attacker. He keeps moving, cutting down a third before the others can react. The dying screams of the soldiers fill the burning street. Johann stands amid the flames and bodies, bloodied but unbroken. Even so, he questions why he is doing this and why he chose to return to the castle at all. He knows Father Valberg was right and that he should have been running away. He also knows that facing the Emperor's knight should mean certain, pointless death. Then another familiar voice reaches him and snaps his thoughts into focus. he finds Philip, still alive but pinned to a chair by arrows among the dead. Seeing his friend breathing, Johann is startled by the small mercy. Philip weakly asks why Johann came back at all. He tells Johann to run because staying here will only get him killed. Instead, Philip struggles to hand over his own helmet, saying he wanted Johann to have it for the day he became a lord. Johann takes the gift in silence as Philip's words trail off. His face hardens as grief gives way to decision. In his mind, Kegel's lesson returns: know the difference in skill and do not challenge what you cannot beat. The warning continues that if the enemy is too dangerous, especially someone like the Emperor's Knight, he should run. Johann remembers that even his master told him to flee without looking back, yet he cannot accept it. Another part of Kegel's creed rises stronger: if he must fight, then he must kill. Johann accepts that truth and decides that moment has arrived. He puts on Philip's helmet and rises as if becoming someone new. Armed and masked, he pushes through the castle doors toward the enemy inside. The Imperial soldiers within turn in confusion at the lone figure entering through the blood-soaked hall. They realize the intruder is Johann and panic over how he got inside and what happened to the guards. Johann advances with murderous calm, naming Karamov as his true target. Before they can stop him, he smashes through the soldiers blocking his path. As he tears through them, Johann roars for Karamov to come out and face him. His relentless steps continue deeper into the castle, carrying him straight toward the confrontation he has chosen. A blood-soaked masked swordsman advances through the red-lit ruin with murder already decided. His dark blade drips as he closes in on the armored knight he came to kill. The Golden Knight recognizes that the runaway son of Ates has survived after all. He identifies his opponent as Johann Ates, the man from the castle gate, and probes his identity. Johann refuses introductions and makes clear that rage, not ceremony, brought him here. He brands the knight an enemy worth killing and draws himself into the confrontation. The Golden Knight coldly says Johann should have kept fleeing if he valued his life. Seeing Johann will not back down, the knight accepts the duel. He invites Johann to come die by his hand and raises his massive sword to meet him. Johann erupts forward, declaring that charging to kill was always his intention. Their first clash detonates across the rooftop in a violent burst of force. The knight immediately presses in, trying to overwhelm Johann at close range. Johann twists through the attack and answers with a sharp counter from the flank. Steel crashes against the knight's great blade as Johann forces the exchange into a contest of speed. Their weapons grind together, each testing the other's strength and timing. The deadlock tightens for a heartbeat as either yields the line. Then the Golden Knight explodes out of the bind with a sweeping strike that hurls Johann away. Johann flips through the air, regaining balance before the fall can become defeat. He immediately surges back in, refusing to let distance favor the heavier fighter. The knight grins behind his helm, delighted that the fight is proving entertaining. A thin red killing line flashes between them as the battle turns more precise and dangerous. Johann darts through the crossing trajectories, slipping between lethal angles instead of meeting them head-on. He keeps threading through the red line of death, searching for the opening inside the knight's offense. The knight unleashes a storm of slashes, trying to cut Johann apart before he can close in. Confident in his reach and armor, the knight commits to another crushing overhead blow. The greatsword slides down with enough force to split stone and body alike. Its edge carves through a pillar, as Johann narrowly avoids being cleaved in two. Masonry erupts around them, but the knight remains composed amid the destruction. Instead of frustration, he finds Johann's survival increasingly interesting. He judges Johann already superior to Britz, the fallen warrior lying dead nearby. Smoke and dust swirl as the knight recalculates the threat before him. A red-armored soldier tumbles into the battlefield, screaming as chaos spreads around the duel. The knight cuts through the interruption without losing his exhilaration, savoring the carnage and the challenge. He demands even more from Johann, treating the battle like a game meant to amuse him. Johann's hatred sharpens as he recognizes the man as the bastard son of Ates. He lunges again with a broad slash while the knight braces to receive it. This time Johann's blade bites through the knight's supposedly invulnerable armor. The knight recoils in shock as the cut lands where no human weapon should be able to reach. For the first time, his confidence visibly falters. He stumbles back, realizing Johann has wounded him through Dhanu's steel. The two separate for a moment, the balance of power suddenly altered. The knight stares at the damaged armor in disbelief, unable to accept that a human cut through Dhanu's steel. Pain and trembling run through him as the impossible wound sinks in. Johann steadies his sword, ready to exploit the fear he has finally created. The knight's certainty collapses into a single question of what Johann truly is. Johann answers by charging again before the knight can recover his composure. They collide in a rapid exchange, Johann forcing the pace with relentless pressure. Even while retreating, the knight marvels at Johann's monstrous strength, though he begins to analyze its limits. He blocks another crushing blow and notices that Johann still fights more like a beast than a trained swordsman. Johann's attacks rain down in brutal arcs, powerful enough to shatter defenses through sheer force. The knight convinces himself Johann is only a brute whose wide swings lack finesse. Believing he has found the pattern, he prepares to punish the next oversized slash. Johann's blade crashes in again, but the knight reads it and slips away from the line. Johann's footing shifts as he commits his weight into the attack. The knight counters with a simple thrust and judges Johann too crude to stop it cleanly. He concludes Johann is fighting on instinct alone and wonders whether Gesson never taught him true swordsmanship. Still, the knight recognizes that such raw danger must be ended quickly before it turns fatal. He waits for the familiar wide slash, planning to exploit it decisively, but Johann abruptly changes the line of attack, catching the knight off guard. Their blades scrape and twist as Johann abandons brute force for a hidden technique. The knight realizes too late that his head would have come off if he had stayed on the original line. Trying to recover dominance, he taunts Johann to attack again. Instead, Johann's sword traces fluid assassin arcs that the knight cannot immediately read. Johann descends from above with precise control, forcing the knight into a desperate block. A spectral blue beast-like aura coils around Johann's blade as his true style awakens. The empowered strike smashes into the knight's guard and drives him backward. Johann follows with another cutting angle before the knight can reset. The sequence lands cleanly and blood bursts from the knight as Johann finally breaks through in earnest. The Golden Knight is stunned by how badly he has misjudged the fight. In the knight's widening eye, Johann's fist appears as the next blow arrives without mercy. Johann punches straight through the helm's opening and caves in the knight's face. The knight reels upright, body locked in shock as the brutal strike lands at point-blank range. Blood erupts from inside the helm, confirming the damage is catastrophic. He screams through a mouthful of blood as agony replaces his earlier delight. His great sword drops uselessly into the stone, no longer under his control. The knight staggers with blood pouring from his ruined face and chest. Panic finally overtakes him as he understands he is close to death. He realizes Johann had concealed Kegel's assassin swordsmanship all along. Cursing himself, he admits he completely let his guard down against the wrong opponent. Another gush of blood leaves him weaker and more desperate. His blood spreads across the stones in a widening pool beneath him. Both men cough blood, but Johann remains standing while the knight sinks toward collapse. Johann's face is finally visible beneath the battered helm, cold and unreadable despite the carnage. The knight drops to one knee before Johann, no longer able to hide his defeat. Johann demands to know why the massacre was carried out. After a long silence, the knight answers that everything was done for the emperor. He explains that the Holy Empire is unstable and that the emperor has drawn the imperial sword to set it right. He begins to name that imperial sword, Mavkara, as if invoking sacred authority. Johann only answers with harsh coughing while the knight struggles to continue. The knight laughs weakly and says Johann's strength has genuinely moved him. He admits that after decades of war and countless duels, he has never met anyone as strong as Johann. Then he tries to recruit Johann, urging him to come to the empire. He insists the emperor needs a talent like Johann immediately. To tempt him, he promises glory bought by the empire's endless gold. He adds visions of vast fertile lands as further reward. He even offers the highest honor, saying the emperor himself would make Johann an imperial knight. He begs Johann to become the emperor's sword. Johann answers first with silence, weighing the offer against something deeper than ambition. The promise of endless gold stirs an old memory rather than desire. He realizes this was once exactly the life he dreamed of, yet now it leaves him empty. Johann rejects the offer outright. The knight can barely comprehend being refused. Johann spits back that the empire slaughtered his family and innocent serfs who had done nothing wrong. The knight repeats the word serfs with contempt, as if their lives are beneath consideration. He is incredulous that Johann would reject imperial favor over common peasants. His disbelief hardens into rage. He snarls that such deaths are meaningless and sneers that Johann must be tainted by low-born blood himself. Revealing his creed, he declares that the strong feed on the weak and calls that the law of the world. Johann's expression turns solemn as he thinks of the master who shaped his conscience. He admits to himself that he still cannot fully control his strength. Even so, he launches forward with his fist instead of his sword. The punch crashes into the knight's face and drives his head violently back. Johann draws back his bloodied hand for another strike. He roars that all this killing was supposedly for the emperor and attacks again in disgust. As his blow smashes the knight's helm, Johann condemns the lives the empire called worthless. He keeps hammering the knight with savage, accelerating force. The knight's eye bulges in terror as the beating destroys what remains of his defense. Johann demands to know what gives men like him the right to judge who deserves to live. His fists continue to fall as he rejects the entire logic of power that justified the massacre. The knight's face and helm cave under the barrage, his body reduced to a target for Johann's fury. One bloodshot eye remains open in shock as consciousness slips away. Blood floods the ground beneath the final impacts. The knight's armored hand twitches weakly, clinging to life by instinct alone. Johann's own fist hangs torn and bleeding from the punishment he dealt. He stands over the broken knight while the dying man coughs from the ground. Johann turns away slightly, as if the answer he wanted has only deepened the emptiness. The knight calls him a fool with his last strength. He says Johann should have accepted the offer while he still could. Now, he warns, the one who broke the emperor's sword has doomed himself. From this moment on, he says, Johann will know nothing but suffering. Johann listens in silence, blood on his face and no fear in his eyes. The knight's hand lifts one last time, more curse than threat. His ruined face sags as death finally overtakes him. Looking at the corpse, Johann reflects that in this world he survived by thinking only of money because death was treated as ordinary. But his clenched hand shows that something in him has changed. He remembers the Empire burning his territory and butchering his family and neighbors. He resolves that even if the whole world becomes his enemy, he will do what must be done. He swears he will never regret that choice no matter who condemns him. For Johann, this resolve becomes the way he will live from now on. Far from the slaughter, the castle gate stands under a cold night sky as another thread of the story begins. The great doors open and a guard admits a worried elven woman into the aftermath. She enters with soldiers and surveys the scene inside the gate. Suspicious and alarmed, she demands the truth from the surviving witness one final time. The battered soldier insists he is telling the truth and begs her to believe him. He recounts that Johann burst in and beat every soldier into the ground. Then, he says, Johann took Sir Karamov's head with his bare hands. The woman is shaken by the claim and asks what became of Karamov after that. She points out that if the story were true, Karamov's corpse should still be here among the fallen. Without proof, she refuses to accept such an absurd account at face value. The witness can only stammer that he does not understand it either, but he swears he saw it happen. When the pursuit party is reported ready, Master Jane suppresses her pain and says she will join them shortly. She moves at once, urgency overriding whatever had been troubling her. Taking command before the assembled troops, she orders the hunt to begin across the whole force. Her command hardens into a kill order as the soldiers are told to chase the fugitive down and eliminate him if needed. She publicly names the target as Johann Eitz, making his identity known to every pursuer. Far ahead in the night, Johann keeps fleeing through the forest with desperate speed. Jane brands him a traitor to his own bloodline and accuses him of murdering Sir Karamov, turning the pursuit into righteous vengeance. Johann runs on while burdened by Karamov's armored corpse, using it as both proof and protection. Jane demands that Johann be hunted down at all costs and brought back even if killing him becomes necessary. The pursuers close in around Johann, but he twists through their attacks instead of being trapped. He cuts down one soldier in a brutal counterattack, proving the chase will not be easy. A second pursuer falls just as quickly under Johann's blade. He keeps carving a path through the attackers, forcing the hunt to respect his lethality. Jane warns the troops that Johann is strong enough to tear through Dhanu's steel and must never be faced alone, like a dragon rather than a man. She orders every road sealed and the chase maintained through the night until exhaustion breaks him. The soldiers, shaken by the accusation, realize Sir Karamov is truly dead. Jane's grief turns cold and absolute as she decides what must be done next. She resolves to send Johann's severed head to the king, making the hunt a matter of royal justice. Remembering Karamov's dying instructions, Johann recalls being told of a hidden stable northwest of the hunting grounds. Karamov had ordered him to take a warhorse there and survive no matter what. Reaching the place at last, Johann recognizes the stable Philip mentioned and feels a brief, exhausted relief. Even so, he remains tense and winded, knowing safety is still uncertain. He reflects that hiding Karamov's body was supposed to buy confusion, but the pursuit party moved far faster than expected. Since Karamov's armor can shield him from arrows and suspicion, Johann decides to keep carrying the corpse until he fully shakes the hunters. Though trembling with fatigue, he forces himself onward because stopping now would mean death. He slips into the stable to claim the escaped Karamov prepared for him. Inside waits Gissen's warhorse, exactly where Johann had been told it would be. Johann quietly thanks his dead brother for leaving him this final chance. He judges that with such a horse beneath him, he can finally rest a little while still moving. Trying to steady himself, he decides to give the horse a name. The horse meets his gaze with an uncanny calm, as if accepting him. Johann names the horse Philip and treats the moment like the start of a partnership. Meanwhile, the searchers find a glint they believe is Dhanu's steel and intensify their sweep of the area. Convinced Johann is close, they push deeper into the forest to flush him out. Some soldiers suddenly hear hoofbeats, realizing the fugitive may already be escaping. Johann bursts from cover on horseback, charging straight past the search line before they can react. He glances back only long enough to confirm he has broken through. The soldiers identify Johann and shout that he is fleeing on horseback. Johann drives Philip harder, gambling everything on speed. Their commander orders him shot down before he can disappear again. A volley of bolts is loosed after him in a desperate attempt to stop the escape. The missiles strike Karamov's armored body strapped behind Johann, and the dead knight absorbs the attack for him one last time. Johann vanishes deeper into the moonlit woods as the bolts fail to bring him down. He rides through the entire night and gradually leaves the pursuit party behind. By dawn he has reached the depths of the Black Forest, far from the first line of pursuit. There he decides the place is remote enough to bury Karamov properly, feeling that even a twisted man should not be left unburied. As he turns back to the corpse, another thought begins to form. He notices that Karamov's armor is extraordinarily valuable, too precious to ignore. His attention shifts to the sword, whose strange purple sheen immediately stands out. Testing it in his hands, Johann realizes the blade is light, solid, and forged from Dhanu's steel. He draws it fully, sensing it is no ordinary weapon. Ancient imperial script on the blade catches his eye, and he reads the title Crest Recover. The sword's name settles over him with ominous weight as he studies the inscriptions. He wonders whether the weapon is tied to recovering noble family crests, and instinctively feels it is dangerous to him. For now he decides to keep the sword but bury the armor with the body. Though it pains him to abandon such wealth, He promises himself he will return for it later when he is safer. He begins digging the grave in the forest soil with grim determination. Each strike of the shovel becomes a labor against exhaustion and time. After burying both corpse and equipment, he wonders whether the concealment is good enough. His shaking hands reveal how close he is to collapse. The strain shows in his eyes as the consequences of what he has done catch up to him. He understands that once news spreads that Karamov, the Emperor's knight, has died, the whole empire and the dead knight's followers will come for him. Karamov's final curse echoes in his mind that from now on Johann will know only suffering. Johann bitterly thinks his life had already been suffering long before he beat Karamov to death. With no home, no money, and barely any strength left, he can only stop and wonder what to do next. That pause is broken when a monstrous presence with glowing red eyes suddenly appears behind him. He whirls around and raises the new sword on instinct. A gigantic black wolf emerges from the darkness, turning his brief rest into another fight for survival. Johann curses his luck, realizing the beast has found him at his weakest possible moment. Facing the wolf in his current state, he knows he has almost no chance of winning. Even gripping the sword feels difficult because his strength is nearly gone. He decides his only hope is to reach the horse and flee before the beast attacks. That hope dies when nearby soldiers shout that they have found his horse. The pursuit party captures Philip and concludes Johann must still be close. Johann recognizes the wolves of Akaton have arrived as well, tightening the noose around him. The pursuers pinpoint his location and rush toward the sound. They finally spot him in the clearing and bring their crossbows to bear. Johann realizes the situation has become hopelessly crowded with enemies. A monster blocks his way forward while the pursuit party closes from behind. With no route left to run, he wonders if this is where his life ends. The black wolf leaps, and Johann braces for the killing blow. Instead, the beast crashes into the soldiers, tearing through them before it ever reaches Johann. The wolf massacres the pursuers in a frenzy, scattering bodies and screams across the clearing. The surviving soldiers panic and beg for help as they realize the true threat is the monster, not Johann. Johann is stunned that the wolf ignored him and is clearing a path through his enemies instead. He drops low and prepares to exploit the opening before it disappears. Knowing hesitation means death, he forces his body to move despite its limits. He commits to escape with a desperate burst of will. Johann sprints away while the wolf continues rampaging behind him. He vaults back into the saddle in one fluid, urgent motion. With Philip under him again, he lashes the reins and drives the horse forward. Horse and rider launch away from the slaughter at full speed. As he flees, a childhood memory surfaces of someone guiding him patiently as he learned to write. He rides on through the memory, clinging to motion as if it alone can keep him alive. Another memory follows of a younger, happier self speaking eagerly to an elder. The present intrudes again as Johann's eye hardens with pain and recollection. He remembers a fierce younger self training to fight and refusing to stay weak. The memories darken into the violent path he later walked, with blood, fear, and the terror he inspired in others. Looking back over the burning ruin of his past, he silently measures how far he has fallen. He recalls the aftermath of slaughter and the grim faces of those who survived it. One memory lingers on a wounded man removing a helmet, as if revealing a truth Johann cannot forget. He bids farewell in his heart to Eight's village, the home now reduced to ashes behind him. Back in the present, one of the pursuers lies dying from the wolf's attack. The black wolf stands over the dead and wounded like a calamity given form. Then it departs the battlefield, leaving only devastation in its wake. The beast's silence is more unnerving than any roar, as if it has acted by some unknowable purpose. By sunrise, soldiers have established another checkpoint on the roads beyond the forest. Johann discovers this new blockade and realizes the way out is sealed again. Exhausted, hungry, and barely functioning after days of flight, he admits to himself that he is in terrible shape. He reflects that the wolves of Akaton have hounded him for 3 straight days without pause. He has nearly died countless times while fighting off their pack attacks. Now he is at his limit, and can barely lift his sword anymore. Seeing no clean escape, he fears he may simply be captured and executed. While watching the checkpoint from hiding, he notices another group approaching the road. A guarded trade wagon comes into view, offering him a possible way through. He identifies it as a peddler caravan with armed escorts rather than soldiers. An idea strikes him immediately. He can pass himself off as part of their company. If he blends into their group, he may slip through the checkpoint without drawing suspicion. The caravan belongs to the Katana Trading Company, led by a catfolk merchant named Eldens. As the caravan halts, Eldens is informed that a heavily armed rider is waiting ahead. The report shocks him because the lone rider looks more like a battlefield threat than a traveler. One escort leader, Ken of the Goran mercenaries, urges immediate battle preparations. A younger mercenary, Gamson, dismisses the danger and says 9 of them should be enough to crush one rider. Goran rebukes him and points out that the stranger rides a warhorse and wears full armor unlike them. He further notes the plate helmet and breastplate, warning that this is no ordinary wanderer. Goran draws attention to the sword at the rider's waist, sensing the real danger lies there. Recognizing the purple hilt as Donna's steel, he warns that one swing could cut their armor apart. He concludes that a direct clash could wipe them out despite their numbers, though Gamson still protests. Annoyed by the boy's foolishness, Goran orders him removed so he can think clearly. The others drag the youth back and silence him before he worsens the situation. Eldon's orders Ken and Goran to ready everyone for an instant attack if the rider makes one suspicious move, while he goes forward to assess him personally. He instructs them to wait for his signal, and then strike all at once if needed. Ken and Goran accept the plan and prepare themselves for a sudden fight. From Johan's side, the merchant and his escorts approach cautiously while keeping their distance. Behind Eldon's, the mercenaries quietly plan to knock Johan from the saddle first, and then stab through the gaps in his armor. Eldon's introduces himself politely, and asks Johan's name to avoid unnecessary misunderstanding. Johan is startled to find a catfolk merchant leading the caravan, a detail he had not expected. Eldon's notices the hidden tension of his own escorts, and realizes they are ready to pounce. The merchant studies Johan carefully, suspicious but not yet hostile. Johan senses that Eldon's is wary of his appearance, and decides he must lower the merchant's guard before anything else. He gives his real name, claims bandits attacked him on the road, and urges them not to be overly alarmed. Then he openly points out the mercenaries glaring at him, and asks that they be told not to attack. Eldon's laughs off the tension, apologizes for the rudeness, and explains that merchants must always assume the worst. Johan accepts that logic and moves to the real reason he approached them. He asks to travel with the caravan, explaining that the attack left him without money or means. In exchange for food and a place to sleep, he offers his strength as an additional guard. After weighing Johan's usefulness against the risk, Eldon's agrees to the arrangement. He says the caravan is bound for Marseille and tells Johan to get acquainted with the mercenaries for the long journey ahead. Johan thanks him, but the unfamiliar destination name immediately reminds him how little he knows of the world beyond his ruined home. As Eldon's reassures his uneasy escorts that Johan is only a wanderer traveling with them for now, he still quietly orders them to keep watching him just in case. As the caravan nears danger, Eldon's quietly orders his men to kill the young escort if anything goes wrong. The eye-patched captain and his subordinate accept the order while the hidden target remains unaware. The black-haired youth steels himself, thinking he only needs to slip through the checkpoint ahead. At sunset, the merchant caravan rolls toward the roadblock with guards and escorts in place. Checkpoint soldiers spot the approaching group and prepare to stop them. The wolves of Akiton halt the caravan and demand a quiet inspection before allowing passage. Behind his mask, the youth hopes he can pass without drawing attention. Eldon's invokes the powerful Katana Trading Company and demands to speak to whoever is in charge. The checkpoint troops are shaken because Katana is tied to Marseille, a city influential enough to make even imperial forces cautious. Trying to stay polite, the soldiers explain they are searching for a runaway trader and ask for cooperation. The youth realizes with alarm that the checkpoint truly was set up to catch him. A guard singles him out and orders him to remove his helmet so they can see his face. Cornered, he stalls by pretending he has a facial condition and cannot uncover himself. The soldiers mock him and press harder, making it clear they suspect he is hiding something. One guard leans in with a taunting grin and openly challenges his excuse. The youth's fear spikes as he sees the inspection turning into exposure. The guard's expression hardens, ready to force the issue. Accepting that he may have to fight, the youth quietly reaches for his sword. Before he can act, a sharp interruption cuts through the standoff. The lead guard is jolted by the sudden shift in authority. Eldon's angrily rebukes the soldiers for treating Katana like suspects and demands their commanding officer. He escalates the threat by promising a direct complaint to their captain if they interfere any further. Eldon's makes it worse by invoking the Marseille branch personally, raising the stakes. Intimidated, the guard swallows his pride and orders the road cleared. The other soldiers resent it but obey the command. As the caravan is released, one guard spits out an insult while the youth is relieved to have avoided a fight. The wagon finally passes the checkpoint, and the youth thinks he has escaped the trap. But as he looks back, several figures remain watching from the road in an ominous silence. Those watchers stand like a hidden strike force rather than ordinary checkpoint troops. Later that night under a full moon, the mercenaries make camp and prepare for watch duty. The oldest and newest recruits are assigned the night watch around the fire. Eldon studies a document, and seems to reconsider the youth's place in the camp. He calls the youth by the name Johan, and tells him he can sleep since he has nothing urgent to do. Grateful for the chance, the youth thanks him and drops his disguise. He exhales in relief as the tension of the checkpoint finally eases. He lays out a bedroll beside the campfire and settles down. Exhausted and aching, he thinks even getting a little sleep has been far harder than expected. He curls up with his sword close at hand and falls asleep by the fire. A sudden flash in the darkness jolts him from uneasy rest. He snaps awake through the brush as if sensing danger before fully understanding it. Hidden attackers quietly receive the order to get everyone ready. Their leader reveals the plan to surround the camp from the hill and strike all at once. The scene abruptly echoes a military commendation, as if his mind is comparing the ambush to battlefield doctrine. He recalls a lesson in defense in depth, where a small force held off a larger enemy through layered tactics. That memory centers on Kim Johan, a soldier praised for exceptional tactical sense. The remembered ceremony rewards Johan with commendation and leave, reinforcing the contrast with his current life. In the memory, Johan answers crisply and proudly to the honor. He had once thought military strategy suited him perfectly because he had studied for it. But that fantasy curdles as he remembers the army's rigid hierarchy, brutal shifts, and miserable conditions. Worst of all, he remembers the humiliatingly tiny pay that made the whole life unbearable. In his nightmare, he tries to flee that life, only to feel it dragging him back. The dream taunts him that he may enter the army but can never leave on his own terms. He startles fully awake, realizing the memory was only a dream. Still lying on his bedroll, he wonders if what he saw was just a nightmare. A dry laugh escapes him as he tries to shake it off. He sits up sore and irritated, blaming the dream of army life for ruining his rest. Then he notices something off and goes still. The moonlit sky hangs calm for one breath before the attack begins. Arrows suddenly rain down from above, and he looks up in confusion. He reacts instantly and snatches an arrow out of the air before it can hit him. Another arrow streaks toward his face, close enough to kill him. He catches that one too by sheer reflex, stunned at his own speed. As the camp erupts, he first assumes the checkpoint soldiers have come for him again. Realizing the camp is under attack, he decides he has to warn the mercenaries immediately. He shouts a full warning that the enemy is ambushing them. The eye-patched captain and the young recruit whip around in shock at the cry. Even Eldens is startled by the sudden alarm. The moment rewinds slightly to just before the enemy fully reveals itself. At that earlier moment, the eye-patched captain was still complaining that only his men were being worked to exhaustion. He snaps at the recruit to stop whining, then senses something strange. The captain argues that trusting an unknown traveler with guard duty would have been reckless because he could have robbed or killed them. He lectures that mercenary work punishes those who cannot tell what truly matters. For a second he falters, caught between pride and doubt. The young recruit blurts out that he became a mercenary to live like a real man instead of rotting in a village. He bitterly adds that if he had known this company was so incompetent, he never would have joined. The insult enrages the captain, who threatens to kill him for speaking that way. The two square off, their own camp on the verge of infighting. That is when Johan's warning about the enemy ambush crashes over them. Both mercenaries look up as arrows descend from every direction. The captain throws himself over the recruit with his shield and orders him to get down. When the first volley ends, he realizes they survived the rain of arrows. He immediately tells the recruit to summon the others before the next wave comes. Terrified, the recruit bolts to carry the warning. The captain curses Johan for being right about the danger. Another mercenary rushes in, relieved the captain is alive and confirming it was an ambush. The captain asks about the missing recruit only long enough to refocus on whether Eldens is safe. He learns Eldens is hiding under the wagon and orders everyone to get ready to fight. Johan steps forward and starts issuing practical orders, telling two men to form a circular defense around the wagon. He explains they must stay together because they do not know from which direction the attackers will strike. His attempt to take command is met with contempt from men who do not see him as their superior. The captain rejects Johan's authority and says the mercenaries will handle things their own way. Johan is left staring in disbelief at their stubbornness. The mercenaries ignore him and scramble for shields while preparing for battle on instinct alone. Johan insists he has seen a battle like this before and asks for a shield so he can help properly. Eldens refuses outright, saying there are not enough shields and Johan must fend for himself. Johan realizes they still do not trust him at all. Then he senses the attackers closing in. A mob of ragged, torch-bearing bandits bursts from the darkness with weapons drawn. Johan recognizes at once that these are not Imperial soldiers but an ordinary bandit gang. The captain abandons defense entirely and orders all units to charge. The mercenaries rush forward in a reckless counterattack. Johan is horrified because their charge leaves the wagon and merchant exposed. The two sides crash together in chaotic melee as the mercenaries demand to know who dared ambush them. The bandits answer with brute confidence, shouting that they outnumber the mercenaries and can overwhelm them. A blonde mercenary tries to rally his side, warning that giving ground means death. A bandit smashes him in the face before he can finish, silencing the speech with violence. Seeing his men falter, the captain shouts for Captain Goran to hold the line. A bandit raises his sword to finish the fallen blonde mercenary. Johan lunges in and intercepts the killing blow with his own weapon. His sword releases a sweeping purple-black slash that tears through the attackers in front of him. The surviving bandits freeze in confusion at the impossible strike. They stare as the cut continues past them, too fast to understand. Even the mercenary behind the shield cannot make sense of what just happened. The blonde mercenary looks up and realizes the bandit attacking him has been split apart. Johan stares at his blade in shock as he understands the sword cut a man cleanly in half in an instant. The weapon's carved runes flare red as if feeding on the blood it spilled. The glowing letters pulse ominously along the blade. One bandit recognizes the signs and realizes the runes are absorbing blood. Panic spreads as they identify Johan's weapon as a demonic sword. The mercenaries are just as shaken, unable to believe a mere caravan escort carries such a weapon. Thinking fast, Johan loudly declares himself Johan Yates of House Yates and demands to know who dares attack him. The eye-patched captain is stunned by the sudden claim of noble birth. The blonde mercenary, bloodied and wide-eyed, realizes Johan is supposedly a noble. Johan privately hopes the altered surname sounds close enough to pass. The bandits convince themselves that anyone wielding a demonic sword under a house name must belong to a powerful noble family. Johan presses the advantage, demanding an answer while brandishing the blood-fed blade. He offers the bandits a choice between surrender and death by the demonic sword. With cold confidence, he points the weapon at them and forces the threat to feel real. The bandits waver, suddenly terrified of what killing a noble might bring upon them. Their leader hesitates, breathing hard as fear overtakes aggression. One by one, swords begin dropping to the ground. More weapons clatter down as the surrender spreads through the group. Soon a pile of discarded blades forms at Johan's feet. The bandits collectively surrender, raising their hands and begging for mercy. Johan lowers his sword slightly, keeping control while the danger ebbs. He calls to Goran and orders the surrendered bandits bound, and the mercenary answers him like a subordinate. A sinister inner voice urges Johan to cut down anyone who resists, but he ignores it. With the battle won, Eldons nervously asks what should be done next about the prisoners and the supposed noble. The mercenaries, now kneeling before him, anxiously hope he will not hold a grudge for how poorly they treated him. Eldons tries to frame their earlier acceptance of Johan into the caravan as an act of goodwill and promises to smooth things over. He approaches Johan with exaggerated warmth, calling him Sir Johan of House Yates and pretending concern for his rough night. Eldons thanks him for protecting the caravan and inwardly regrets not lending him a shield once he thinks Johan is truly noble. Johan brushes off repayment and says he is simply glad Eldons is safe. That unexpected generosity leaves Eldons bewildered because he had assumed a noble would demand compensation. Johan notices the merchant's confusion but does not understand why he is so shaken. He casually asks that next time someone lend him a shield. Eldons eagerly promises he will give Johan a shield before anyone else from now on, and Johan accepts the answer. Johan then asks for the mercenaries' help interrogating the captured bandits, and they readily agree. Eldons adds one request of his own, asking Johan to speak more formally now that his noble status has supposedly been revealed, and Johan awkwardly agrees. Before the new arrangement can settle, a surviving bandit is driven forward and denounced as the thief they need to question. After crushing the ambushers, Johan stands over their trembling leader and demands answers. He presses the captive to identify himself, explain the attack, and confirm whether he commands the group. The man reveals they once served House Brits, a noble house that was recently annihilated. He explains that the Empire accused House Brits of treason without proof and massacred everyone from children to elders. The survivors say the force that destroyed them was the wolves of Akiton, which makes Johan go still. They resisted until the Emperor's feared executioner joined the assault, at which point they were routed and forced to flee. When the title noble executioner is mentioned, Johan's companions realize it likely refers to someone he already knows. The name Karamov confirms Johan's suspicion and reminds him of the Emperor's personal hound. The captive panics, apologizes for attacking a noble, and admits they never expected one to be traveling with merchants. He says the Imperial Army branded them rebels while Northerners rejected them as deserters, leaving them hunted from every side. Johan acknowledges that banditry is wrong, but the man insists they turn to robbery simply to stay alive. Johan asks whether desperation was truly their only motive for attacking the caravan. The leader swears they targeted the caravan only because merchant goods promised money, provoking fury from the traders. Eldons explodes in outrage, arguing that trade survives on trust and men like these destroy it. As Eldons rages about the damage bandits cause, Johan's men restrain him and urge him to calm down. Johan pieces together that the Emperor likely fabricated the treason charge and used Karamov as the weapon to purge nobles. With that realization, Johan finally understands the true meaning behind Karamov's earlier words. He concludes there was never any treason at all, only an excuse for the Emperor to unleash slaughter. One of Johan's companions bitterly curses Karamov and wishes him the cruelest possible death. Johan sees the former retainers as people crushed by the same kind of power that ruined his own life. Even so, he cannot ignore that they became bandits, leaving him uncertain about what judgment to pass. An eye-patched subordinate asks for orders and even offers to beat more information out of the captives. Johan refuses, saying they already know enough, and his men prepare to obey. Before Johan can decide further, an overeager mercenary raises his mace and calls for the prisoners to be beaten to death. He brings the weapon down toward a bound captive's head, turning Johan's hesitation into immediate action. The eye-patched veteran intercepts the blow at the last instant and physically stops the execution. The hot-headed attacker demands to know why he is being restrained. The veteran reminds him that the prisoners surrendered to Johan, and that a coward who hid from battle has no right to punish anyone. Shamed but still sulking, the young mercenary pretends to accept the rebuke. The bound men seize the chance to beg Johan for mercy and promise never to rob again. Their whole group kneels in terror, shaking and waiting for Johan's verdict. The eye-patched man offers to execute them immediately if Johan gives the word. His hand settles on his sword hilt as the decision hangs in the air. Johan finally orders his men to disarm the captives and let them go. The former bandits are stunned by the mercy, while Johan's own side questions whether he truly means it. The same hot-headed mercenary protests openly against sparing them. Johan cuts through the objections and makes everyone listen. He says he understands that these men know little besides fighting, but robbery still cannot be accepted. Johan argues that if survival forced them to learn violence, they must now learn some other way to live. Eldons is startled by Johan's insistence that even desperate men can choose new skills. Johan points out that many people stay honest not because they cannot steal, but because they decide not to, and Goran bluntly admits he himself only fights for pay. He tells the captives that sparing their lives is their chance to learn a trade and make an honest living. The freed men collapse in gratitude and vow never to forget Johan's mercy. With the matter settled, Johan orders the group onward, eager to leave the ugly scene behind and get some rest. Elsewhere, a shadowy wolf-like presence watches from above, hinting that danger has not truly passed. The black beast turns toward the road below, wrapped in ominous red-black energy. Its glowing eyes fix on the travelers with predatory intent. Before continuing to Marcel, Johan's party decides to stop and rest in a small settlement called Rutsbeck Village. Johan arrives exhausted enough to look half dead in the saddle. The quiet village and sunset promise the first real pause he has had in a long time. Inside the village, the chief is informed that Sir Eldons of the Katana Trading Company has arrived. The chief hurries out to greet the visitors personally. Eldons excitedly calls out to the village chief, pleased to see an old acquaintance after months apart. The chief warmly welcomes Eldons and immediately asks whether anything happened on the road. Eldons admits they were attacked by bandits and complains that the Emperor's chaos has made the roads worse. The chief jokingly warns him not to say such things too loudly, though both are relieved the goods arrived safely. Eldons credits their survival to the noble traveling with them and frames Johan as their savior. He praises Johan's courage so highly that the chief recalls another supposed noble who passed through recently. The chief says that earlier noble turned out to be a fraud, so he had the man beaten and driven out of the village. Eldons winces at the chief's old temper and notes he still acts rashly when angered. He quickly reassures the chief that Johan is different, calling him brave, upright, and selfless. When Eldons adds that Johan refused any reward, the chief is left genuinely shocked. After thinking it over, the chief decides such a knight would be invaluable protection for a village plagued by bandits. He reflects that in these times a single capable knight can wipe out whole armed groups and keep ordinary people safe. Seeing an opportunity, the chief eagerly invites Johan to stay for days or even weeks so the village can benefit from his presence. Johan politely refuses to impose, but the chief laughs it off and treats him like a friend rather than a burden. The cat merchant jokes that the chief is shamelessly trying to steal Johan away from the caravan. The chief cheerfully ignores the insult and asks where this precious noble is now. The answer is that the precious noble is not basking in praise at all but sitting alone under a tree, miserable and hungry. Johan, worn out and starving, looks more like a beggar than a celebrated savior. A concerned companion approaches him and hesitantly asks what he needs. Johan simply asks for something to eat. The companion instead hands him the money recovered from the bandits, saying it belongs to him. He explains that the bandits' weapons and belongings were sold off, producing a respectable sum. Johan asks whether the others took any share for themselves. When he hears they did not, he pauses and thinks the matter over. He abruptly pushes the whole bag back and orders the money divided among the men. The blonde mercenary is horrified and insists all the spoils should belong to Johan because the prisoners surrendered to him. Johan claims he already took his share and reveals it is only a few coins. He laughs outwardly as if it means nothing, while inwardly it pains him to part with the money. Still, he convinces himself that buying the loyalty of a mercenary band is far wiser than facing the wolves of Akaton alone. He adds that he did not win the battle by himself anyway. Johan calls the men comrades in arms now and decides sharing the spoils should earn him their goodwill. Having made his move, he turns to leave as though the matter is settled. The blonde mercenary is overwhelmed and starts idolizing Johan as the very image of a true knight. Word of Johan's generosity spreads quickly through the group and draws everyone together. The blonde man loudly announces that Johan has shown them extraordinary generosity. He declares that Johan is distributing the proceeds from the spoils of war to all of them. The men can barely believe that money which should have been Johan's is being handed to them instead. For a moment they just stare, trying to process what they heard. Then the camp erupts in ecstatic cheering for Johan. His name echoes through the village as the men shout it over and over. The noise carries all the way to the inn where Johan has gone to sleep. Unaware of the trouble coming, Johan lies asleep with his sword resting across his chest. Late that night, someone quietly approaches his room and tests the door. The intruder eases the door open without waking him. Moonlight slips into the room as the assassin enters. A candle flickers in the draft, marking the silence before violence. Johan remains asleep, still and vulnerable. The attacker's red eyes gleam in the darkness as he fixes on Johan. Knife in hand, the masked assassin lunges toward the bed. The scene flashes back to the previous night, when Johan's public generosity first stirred dangerous feelings. As the men celebrated Johan's gift, one person watched the distribution with growing resentment. Johan walked away from the cheering, unaware that his kindness had also created a grudge. Privately, he congratulated himself for winning goodwill cheaply while keeping the more valuable silver for himself. At that moment, an old villager approached and politely confirmed that he was Sir Johan. The old man recognized him as the noble traveling with Eldons and treated him with deference. He offered Johan the best room in the village inn, explaining that Eldons had already covered the costs. Johan accepted, pleased that Eldons had repaid him in comfort just when he needed it most. He let the old man lead him to the inn without suspicion. Back at the celebration, Gamson suddenly realized everyone but him was receiving a share. The blonde mercenary coldly told him that because he hid while the others fought, he would get nothing. Gamson seethed with humiliation and resentment as the others left him behind. That exclusion planted the thought that Johan was the reason he had been singled out. From inside the inn, the old man ushered Johann in while someone watched from the shadows. Johann's distinctive purple-hilted sword remained strapped close even as he entered to rest. Gamson's bitterness hardened into a decision as he nursed his wounded pride. The inn signs swayed outside while the village settled into sleep, hiding the danger gathering within. Later, Johann relaxed in a hot bath, finally letting his guard down. He savored the warmth and thought that for the first time in ages he was truly resting. Surrounded by a soft bed, hot water, food, and wine, he realized how deeply he had missed ordinary comforts. He bitterly reflected that life on the run had taught him how hard it was to live without even a roof overhead. Remembering his old life, he admitted that even as a noble he had never understood how precious simple security was. Then his thoughts returned to the emperor who destroyed his home and drove him into this life. He reminds himself that countless others suffered under the same tyranny, not just him. Even so, he cannot help thinking that merely surviving may already make him luckier than most. The thought of his desperate situation makes him wonder whether he should have accepted Karamov's offer after all. He knows that if he keeps running as he is, the Imperial Army will eventually catch and execute him. Searching for another path, he suddenly remembers something important. He recalls how even armed men who feared no merchants still treated Eldons with caution. That makes him realize the real power lies not in Eldons alone but in the trading company behind him. A childhood memory of learning about merchants at the village market helps the idea take shape. He remembers that trading companies share information and money across borders through wide networks. The strongest of them can influence nobles, politics, and even armies. Johann decides that if he wants to survive while hunted by the Empire, he must get close to a powerful trading company. For the moment, though, he pushes strategy aside and chooses food and sleep first. Outside, the night remains still as signs point toward the tavern and the gate. Johann falls asleep in bed with his sword laid across him as a final precaution. Some time later, the door opens again and the assassin slips inside. Johann still appears asleep, giving the intruder confidence. The attacker's eyes burn in the dark as he closes in for the kill. His hand reaches toward Johann's sword, trying to secure it before striking. Knife raised, he leans over Johann and prepares to finish him. The moment the assassin grabs for the weapon, Johann catches his wrist and exposes the ambush. With a violent twist, Johann knocks the blade aside before it can descend. The masked attacker freezes in shock as his surprise attack fails instantly. Johann rises like a shadow over him and demands an answer. He coldly asks whether the would-be killer is one of Karamov's lackeys. Panicking, the assassin struggles and begs Johann to let go. Johann hurls the attacker bodily through the door, smashing it apart, and ending the ambush before it can begin. A beaten young thief lies on the floor coughing blood and tears, already realizing his robbery has gone terribly wrong. As he begs for mercy, an unseen force seizes him by the leg and drags him back in panic. His terror spikes when a dark figure with glowing eyes closes in behind him, and he screams for help. Only then does the assailant understand that the man he challenged is not human at all. 5 minutes earlier inside the inn, an old villager dozes noisily while the night remains calm. The snoring draws the attention of two youths creeping down the stairs, making sure the old man will not interfere. Pierre asks whether it is really safe to leave the theft to their companion, but Gamson confidently insists it is. He reminds Pierre that Vulin is the strongest man in the village and has gone masked and armed, so capture seems impossible. Meanwhile, Pell is expected to steal the horse according to plan, and he is already admiring the noble's warhorse. Pell mounts the horse and tries to calm it, pleased with how valuable and powerful it looks. Pierre still worries and asks Gamson whether the noble's sword is truly worth all this risk. Gamson argues that any blade capable of cutting a man clean in half must be priceless. Recalling that he saw the sword split an armored soldier in two, he becomes even more convinced they must steal it. He starts boasting that the knight is nothing without that weapon, but a sudden crash cuts him off. Pierre and Gamson peek around the corner in confusion as coughing and a violent disturbance erupt nearby. They find Vulin sprawled in terror while a pair of glowing eyes watches from the darkness behind him. A monstrous roar and a burst of force slam through the room, confirming that something inhuman is attacking. Gamson freezes in shock as the scale of the danger finally hits him. Pierre grabs him and demands to know what is happening, but Gamson has no answer. Instead, he panics and orders Pierre to run if he wants to live, abandoning any thought of the plan. As he flees, Gamson feels in his gut that they are completely doomed and that whatever is there is terribly wrong. The innkeeper mistakes the commotion for Pierre causing trouble again and angrily calls out to the boys. Outside, Pell is already leading the stolen horses away from the inn under the night sky. When Pierre calls to him, Pell turns back casually, unaware of the disaster unfolding behind him. Gamson rushes up screaming for him to stop talking and get ready to flee immediately. Pell, startled, asks where Vulin is, sensing from their faces that something has gone very wrong. Gamson blurts out that Vulin is either already dead or about to die, shattering Pell's confidence. He forces Pierre onto one horse and orders everyone to mount up at once, ignoring questions about Vulin. Pell refuses to leave without Vulin, but Gamson frantically insists the noble may chase them at any moment. Before they can escape, the inn explodes outward from above with a violent blast. Pierre can only stare upward in horror at the sudden destruction. Pell and Gamson also look up, stunned into silence as the threat reveals itself. A black-eyed figure descends from the shattered roof against the red sky, sword raised like a demon falling from heaven. The intruder's inhuman glare makes it clear that the boys are facing a terrifying power beyond them. Far away on the southern outskirts of the Holy Empire, a grim tree of hanging bodies marks the cruelty of imperial law. 2 armored men hammer a post into the ground beneath that tree, preparing another warning. Once the sign is secured, they confirm the work is done and sturdy. The notice declares that these people stole a noble's property, and that they and their families were punished and hanged there. The decree bears the authority of Emperor Cardarian Bizelferk, making the brutality official imperial policy. One soldier asks in disbelief what kind of theft could possibly justify such a fate. The answer is absurdly small: 1 chicken and 3 eggs taken from Baron Dvorzab's lands. The soldier is shaken that entire families ended up hanging for something so minor. The sight of the corpses drives home how casually the empire turns petty need into mass execution. Back at the inn under the moonlight, the story returns to the village where this same logic is about to play out. Inside, the cat merchant Eldons enjoys tea and food in apparent peace. He savors his drink, unaware that bad news is about to interrupt him. A nervous attendant informs Sir Eldons that there is a problem, and Eldons asks what happened. When he hears that Gamson was caught trying to steal Sir Johann Yates' belongings, Eldons nearly spits out his tea in shock. His composure breaks completely as the implications hit him. He curses the situation because he had hoped to persuade Sir Johann to travel with them to Marseille. After a brief pause, Eldons starts thinking through the danger. He orders Gamson seized at once, and decides the rest of them must pretend they had nothing to do with the theft. The attendant obeys while privately noting how coldly a Katana Trading Company merchant handles a crisis. Eldons forces himself to calm down, reminding himself he has survived worse and must survive this too. He resolves that if necessary he will find some way to deal with the offended noble before things spiral further. Even so, he sits sweating in the dark, trying to steady his nerves. Elsewhere in the village, a meeting is underway beneath the moon in a modest hall. The village chief begins to close the gathering, thinking the night's business is finished. That peace ends when a villager bursts in shouting that something terrible has happened. He reports that the village troublemakers were caught trying to steal a noble's belongings, horrifying the chief. The chief slams the table in rage at the boys' stupidity and the disaster they have invited. When someone asks what they should do, he explodes that the answer should already be obvious. He orders tributes gathered immediately for the noble and even suggests adding one of the slaves hidden in the village as an offering. He goes further and commands that the captured boys be executed in front of the noble to prove submission. The parents recoil in horror, protesting that they cannot let their children die just because the chief values others less. The chief silences them with fury, calling them idiots for not understanding the danger. He smashes a chair to emphasize that panic and sentiment will only get everyone killed. Then he demands whether they have forgotten the emperor's edict on theft from nobles. He insists they must act before the noble does, because that is the only way the village can survive. He recalls the law that anyone who covets a noble's property can be mutilated or worse. That punishment extends to immediate family, up to hanging, making the threat collective rather than personal. The parents remember whole families being wiped out under that absurd decree and begin to break. The chief bitterly notes that people have died over demands as small as 1 chicken and 3 eggs in place of unpaid wages. He presses them to imagine what an offended noble might do to their village now. In his mind, the noble could maim everyone while preaching about knightly honor, and that fear drives his decision. One villager argues that this is Count Jarpin's territory and perhaps the count could protect them. The chief scoffs that nobles care only about their own honor games and not whether commoners live or die. He pounds the table again and tells them to wake up to reality. The parents fall silent, crying because they know he may be right. Others bow their heads too, crushed by helplessness and fear. The chief admits he takes no pleasure in this, but sees no alternative. He declares that if those children die, the village lives, and begs the parents to accept that sacrifice for the greater whole. Soon the villagers gather at the great tree with torches, converging on the place of judgment. The captured youths kneel bound and bruised, whimpering as the crowd closes in around them. Sir Johann stands before them in armor, hands clasped over his sword, trying to decide what to do. He realizes the situation has grown far beyond what he expected. He had first assumed they were imperial assassins, but now sees they are merely foolish village boys who tried to steal a costly-looking sword. Recognizing that his conspicuous weapon tempted them, he decides he should hide it better from now on. Feeling partly responsible, he plans to frighten them enough to teach a lesson and then let them go. He rises to address the crowd, preparing to end the matter without bloodshed. Before he can, the village chief approaches with exaggerated humility and asks after his condition. Johann answers bluntly that he is not alright at all. He condemns the village for welcoming a sleeping guest by putting blades to his throat and looting his baggage. The chief throws himself to the ground and offers a dramatic apology before the entire crowd. He claims full responsibility for failing to control the fools under him. Johann decides the lesson has gone far enough and begins to dismiss the boys with a warning. But the chief suddenly draws a dagger, shouting that this is exactly why he must act. Johann's eye widens as he realizes the chief intends to kill them himself. The chief raises the blade and vows to personally cut off the wretches' heads to restore Johann's honor. Johann is horrified that this man is making everything worse and tries to stop him. The chief refuses to listen, insisting the boys deserve death for staining the knight's honor while Vulin begs him to spare them. He brings the dagger down anyway, committed to murder in the name of obedience. The mothers scream and the chief apologizes to his own son even as he tries to kill him. Johan's greatsword crashes down first, stopping the execution in a violent burst. Furious, Johan demands whether the chief did not hear him tell everyone to stop. The blade halts at Gamson's throat as the boy trembles inches from death. The chief freezes, finally realizing he has crossed a line even the noble did not permit. The watching villagers recoil in terror at how close they came to witnessing a slaughter. A stunned hush spreads through the crowd beneath the tree. Johan shouts that everyone has lost their minds if they are ready to kill over something so trivial. He argues that if punishment is needed, it should be paid in money rather than blood. The chief and crowd stare at him, unable to process such an answer from a noble. Johan awkwardly realizes his own moral outrage may have sounded strange in this place. He clears his throat and repeats himself more plainly so there can be no misunderstanding. He asks how honor could ever be more precious than human life and orders the boys untied and everyone else to leave. The chief drops his dagger, stunned by the command. Overcome, he praises Johan as astonishingly honorable for making such a decision. The parents rush to their children in tears, apologizing and embracing them in relief. The chief suddenly treats Eldons as truthful after all and even regrets ever wanting revenge on him. The villagers begin thanking Johan fervently and vow never to forget his mercy. Gamson too grovels, claiming he misjudged Johan because of a fool's deception and now sees his nobility. The chief tells the boys they survived only because Johan is kinder than most knights would be. At that moment Can, the eye-patched mercenary, arrives and dryly notes he is late to the scene. Still bound, Gamson immediately orders Ken to hurry and free him, assuming rescue has come. Even while trapped, Gamson starts blaming his bad luck and imagining he will do better next time. Ken grabs him by the head and calmly tells him to relax because that will make what comes next easier. Gamson's bravado vanishes as he senses real danger from his own comrade. A sudden slash answers him before he can finish speaking. Johan turns at the spray of blood, startled by the unexpected killing. He looks back in disbelief, trying to understand what just happened. For a moment he can only stare, unable to reconcile the scene with what he intended. Gamson collapses headless before the crowd while Ken stands over the body, having executed him without hesitation. The severed remains and blood make the brutality undeniable. The dead boy's face slackens as life leaves him instantly. Ken lowers his bloody dagger, untroubled by what he has done. Johan demands to know what Ken thinks he is doing, shocked and angry. Ken answers by invoking the Holy Empire's own edict on theft from nobles. He states that he has executed the one who coveted a noble's wealth, presenting the corpse as lawful proof. Johan realizes in horror that Ken took his earlier words lightly and made sure Johan would not have to see the boy's blood, only one man's. Ken's fellow mercenaries tense, unsure whether Johan will see this as loyalty or defiance. Eldons is equally stunned that the mercenary acted so decisively and so coldly. Ken addresses Johan respectfully and explains that mercenaries too have honor and rules they must uphold. He says Gamson's cowardly theft endangered both the lives and reputation of their whole company, so killing him was a matter of mercenary honor. To show he is not resisting judgment, Ken flips his sword and offers the hilt to Johan. Johan accepts the offered weapon, still studying the man before him. Ken tells him that if this still counts as defying noble authority, Johan should punish him however he sees fit, and he will accept it fully. Johan is taken aback by the seriousness and sincerity of that submission. He realizes Ken is right that mercenaries possess their own code, and that Ken is staking his life on it. Johan's grip tightens on the sword as he weighs justice, authority, and the meaning of honor in this place. Eldons watches anxiously, suddenly unsure what judgment Johan will pass next. As the villagers and guards tense up at Ken's reckless defiance, everyone braces for noble retaliation. A knight starts to draw blood with a dagger, but the threat is halted before it can escalate. Johan unexpectedly lowers himself and sincerely apologizes for failing to consider Ken's position. Ken and the cat elder are stunned that a noble would humble himself instead of punishing them. Even Johan's own men can barely process that their lord is apologizing to commoners. Johan calmly orders the dagger put away, reinforcing that he means no harm. He thanks them for understanding, and the cat elder addresses him with newfound respect as Sir Johan. Once the danger passes, Ken's superior scolds him for provoking a noble, while Ken shrugs it off and tells him to beat him if he ever does it again. The cat elder trembles with emotion as Johan's conduct overturns everything he expected from nobles. To him, this noble is fundamentally different from the cruel rulers he knows. He privately marvels that Johan is brave and upright without being tyrannical, almost too ideal to be real. Realizing Johan's value, the elder decides he must secure him as an ally for his trading company. By sunset, Johan's group leaves the village with an escort and wagon, carrying the aftermath of the encounter behind them. Along the road, Johan examines the ornate pocket watch he took as part of the village's offering. He admits he chose it because it looked expensive, only to discover it is broken and wonder if he should have taken everything instead. His thoughts are interrupted when someone calls to him from behind. A timid young attendant approaches and tells Johan he now has to care for someone else as well. The call leads Johan's attention back to the village gate and the people hurrying after him. The villagers present their gifts of gratitude, and Johann notices there is more than money among them. When he recognizes the watch as a precious item, the villagers flatter his discernment and grow even more eager to please him. They also offer him a ragged slave named Godin, claiming the boy knows geography and could be useful. Johann is disturbed by how badly the slave has been treated and realizes leaving him there would likely mean death. He accepts the gift but immediately orders that Godin be washed and fed before they depart, giving the boy his first sign of mercy. Even after taking Godin in, Johann feels uneasy about owning a slave and is unsettled by the boy's strange eyes. Night falls as the caravan makes camp under a crescent moon. Around the fire, the men enjoy meat and soup bought with Johann's share of the spoils, while Ken obediently avoids alcohol as instructed. Johann sits apart with his weapon when Godin nervously approaches him. Godin brings Johann a meal, and Johann accepts it with simple thanks. Trying to ease the distance between them, Johann tells Godin to stop using master and call him by name instead. Godin awkwardly obeys, and Johann is left wondering whether the shy child is actually a girl. Johann asks how someone skilled in geography ended up enslaved, and when Godin hesitates, he admits he has his own share of ugly stories too. Godin is surprised that even a noble like Johann could have suffered misfortune. Johann deflects and asks to hear Godin's story first, inviting trust instead of demanding obedience. Godin explains that he used to be a peddler who transported and resold weapons around the eastern region. Then, under a noble's orders, he was drawn into smuggling gold. Johann notes that such a crime should have meant death and questions why a young weapons merchant would take that risk. Godin says he needed money desperately because his younger siblings were sick and starving, so he kept hiding and delivering the noble's gold, believing he had no other choice. Eventually the noble betrayed him and reported him once he had served his purpose. Johann pieces together that Godin was discarded to keep him silent and asks whether he ever sought a trial. Godin says he could not, because the emperor's edict denied him even the right to speak. Johann curses the emperor's injustice and asks if Godin at least managed to send money home. Godin breaks down and admits the money was seized as bribes to the guards in exchange for sparing his life. When Godin apologizes for crying, Johann gently tells him he has nothing to be sorry for in front of him. Hearing that, Johann's expression hardens as the cruelty of the world presses in on him again. He bitterly reflects that this world is so cruel it makes his teeth chatter. To him, the powerless are exploited like criminals as if that were ordinary life, and no one can stop the noble's atrocities. Not the private soldiers who survive by robbing others. Not the desperate villagers driven to sacrifice their own children just to live. Not even Godin, who was used by nobles and reduced to slavery. Johann wavers, wondering whether helping this pitiful boy is really the right thing. He forces himself to remember that he is already being hunted by the emperor's army and could die at any moment. Then he calls Godin's name, and the boy snaps to attention, correcting himself as he answers Johann. Johann suddenly declares that now they are comrades, Godin must not die. He goes further and urges them both to survive and live well together, leaving Godin flushed and speechless. Their moment is cut short when a guard rushes in to report that a monster has appeared nearby. Johann rises at once, frustrated that he has no time to rest. He demands its location and runs toward the disturbance as the guard points the way. Left behind for a beat, Godin repeats Johann's words about living together and starts to imagine a future beside him. Johann joins the hidden guards, who ask if the monster is in the darkness ahead. They cannot see clearly, but the red aura and presence in the trees leave no doubt that something monstrous is there. Johann recognizes the pressure instantly and realizes this is no ordinary beast. He steps out into the open despite the guards begging him to get down. With unsettling calm, Johann says there is no problem. He orders the terrified men to put their weapons away, shocking them. Ignoring their confusion, Johann says he will go look himself and walks toward the crimson glow. Behind him, the veterans remind each other that fighting monsters requires specialized skill and remains deadly even with traps. They insist their mission is only to protect Eldons and that they cannot risk more than they already have. Johann closes his eyes and feels the presence more clearly. The pressure is familiar to him, the same freezing force he has encountered before. In the dark, a pair of red eyes emerges, confirming what he suspected. Johann plants his feet and faces it without retreating. He identifies the creature as the Black Wolf of ill omen and knows for certain it is the same beast from before. He recalls that the last time he saw it, the wolf attacked the wolves of Akiton instead of him. Even though it could have turned on him at any moment, it never did. That memory convinces him the beast will not attack him now either. So Johann calls it out directly and tells it to stop hiding. The enormous wolf answers with a growl and steps fully into view. Johann asks whether it followed him and thanks it for helping him survive last time. Watching from behind, the guards can only wonder whether Johann has any idea how to deal with monsters. The wolf lowers its muzzle to Johann's face and studies him at breath's distance. Then it suddenly lunges, making the onlookers scream that Johann is finished. The guards brace for Johann's death and curse his recklessness. Instead of being torn apart, Johann catches the beast by the tongue and calmly tells everyone not to be alarmed. The cat elder blurts out that this is not the Black Wolf of ill omen at all but the Guide of Dawn. Pressed to explain himself, he insists his identification is correct. Johann, still holding the wolf's tongue, asks what the Guide of Dawn even is. The elder says there is an old song in the Eastern Empire that tells of such a beast. In that song, During an age of great war on a moonlit night, a warrior gave a wolf a name. The named wolf bowed its head to that warrior and became known as the Guide of Dawn. Its blue eyes shone through the darkness as it ran at the front of the battlefield. When the war ended and the hero died after bringing peace, the tale did not end there. The wolf mourned for 3 days and nights, then wandered on to places where order and heroes were needed. That wandering divine beast came to be remembered as the Guide of Dawn. Johann points out that the creature before them is called the Black Wolf of Ill Omen, not the Guide of Dawn. The elder explains that the legend was distorted as it spread south from the Eastern Empire. Its true meaning is that the Guide of Dawn punishes evil and submits to a brave hero. He adds that this wording comes from an old Eastern text, not mere rumor. Johann realizes the beast may truly belong to that category of being. The elder excitedly asks if he may pet it once, and Johann casually gives permission. The moment the elder reaches out, the wolf roars in his face and nearly scares him out of his skin. Shaken to the core, the elder immediately decides that petting it was a terrible idea. Johann alone can calm the beast, confirming to everyone that it is gentle only with him. The elder suddenly remembers another crucial line from the old folklore. According to that passage, if someone gives a name to the divine beast that follows him, it becomes his vassal. The possibility horrifies and thrills the elder, who wonders whether this obscure southerner could truly be the legendary hero. He urgently asks whether Johann has already named the Guide of Dawn, and Johann says he has not and never had the chance. The elder immediately tells him to do it now, convinced the legend will trigger something extraordinary. Johann, skeptical but curious, asks if that is really how it works. After a moment's thought, he jokingly considers naming the wolf Katana, which earns only a dead stare. Then a memory surfaces of the last time he saw the beast, when he buried the man named Karamov. Following that thought, Johann points at the wolf and names it Karamov. The cat elder is struck speechless, sensing that the name carries unexpected weight. The wolf's red eyes flare brilliantly as the naming takes hold. Johann and the elder stare upward as the beast begins to change. Its crimson aura erupts and then is pierced by a descending blue light. The wolf is engulfed in that blue radiance as its form is remade. A flood of light pours down around Johann and the elder, forcing them to shield their eyes. They are swept back by the surge while the transformation completes before them. Johann can only gape at what he is witnessing. When the light clears, the beast stands reborn with blue eyes and blue flame as Guide of Dawn Karamov. The newly transformed divine wolf steps forward with overwhelming presence. It lowers its head before Johann in unmistakable submission. Johann cautiously reaches out a hand to test whether the bond is real. Karamov accepts the touch, and Johann tells the beast he will be counting on it. The elder, overwhelmed, declares that Eldens was right and that the miracle is real. Johann turns to find the cat elder prostrating himself under the moon. The elder trembles that everything has unfolded exactly as the folklore described and marvels at seeing myth with his own eyes. Still bowing, he confesses that he respected Johann from the moment he first saw him. He praises Johann for protecting them from bandits, showing mercy to enemies, and forgiving them honorably, then pays homage to the one chosen by the Eastern divine beast. At last he proclaims Johann the hero of troubled times. The guards are left stunned, unable to believe what title is being placed on Johann. Godin, too, can only repeat Johann's name in awe. With the divine wolf standing behind him, the title suddenly feels terrifyingly plausible to everyone watching. Johann exhales, already uncomfortable with where this is going. When the elder apologizes in confusion, Johann stops him before the worship can deepen further. He insists he is not that kind of hero at all, only a wanderer from an insignificant house trying to make a living. He adds inwardly that he is also a hunted man, pursued because he beat Karamov to death in another life. Even so, the elder refuses to feel disappointed and clings to his admiration. Instead, he asks permission to introduce Johann to the Marcel Trading Company so he can repay the kindness shown to them. When the elder reminds him that he once said he was heading to Marcel, Johann admits he has never even heard of the place. The elder explains that Marcel is a famous free trade city through which all commerce in the region must pass. More importantly, it is one of the few cities beyond the Emperor's reach, and that revelation instantly catches Johann's attention. Unable to ignore such a lifeline, Johann accepts the offer while the elder thanks him fervently. Johann realizes that if the Emperor truly cannot touch Marcel and trade thrives there, he may finally be able to start over as a merchant. As the elder happily sings the old ballad, Johann can only hope the trading company does not start spreading absurd rumors about him being some hero. Yet part of him wonders how nice it would be if he really could become a hero in troubled times. Whether in his past life or this one, however, he knows he is still just a wanderer struggling to keep himself alive. He grimly concludes that from this point on he will know only suffering. Even so, he clenches his fist and decides this life will be different from the one before, no matter how hard it becomes. Johann steels himself to move forward by his own will, step by step. With that resolve, he heads for Marcel, the city of wealthy merchants. Seeing Marcel again fills Johann with disbelief and relief, because he never thought he would return. Once inside the merchant city, he decides they should use the opportunity to shop. Their divine beast companion suddenly dashes off towards something in town, startling them. A woman treats the beast like an ordinary cute puppy and offers it food, unaware of what it truly is. Johann realizes that to everyone else Karamov currently appears to be nothing more than a harmless little dog. He recalls the night before entering Marcel, when he faced the problem of bringing Karamov into the city. Johann directly appeals to Karamov for help. He explains that a monster of Karamov's size would cause panic in Marcel and asks it to wait outside or change the situation. Karamov responds with irritation rather than obedience. Then the divine beast unleashes its power and begins shrinking itself. Johann watches in shock as the transformation happens before his eyes. A moment later, the terrifying beast has become a tiny barking puppy. Johann is stunned that Karamov can reduce its size so drastically and wonders if this is another divine beast ability. Godin instantly scoops up the tiny Karamov and adores how cute it has become. Johann accepts that this smaller form should let Karamov enter the city without trouble. Even so, the little beast draws attention from curious townspeople, and Johann urges them to leave quickly because they are still being pursued. Back in the present, Johann turns as Godin calls to him. Godin eagerly proposes handling all their equipment if Johann buys a large supply bag, revealing his old merchant instincts. But he admits they only have 4 silver coins and worries that will not cover everything they need. Godin confidently asks Johann to trust him with a single silver coin. He boldly promises to buy every listed necessity with that 1 coin alone. Johann laughs off the boast, unsure what Godin could possibly accomplish with so little. 50 minutes later, Godin returns with a fully packed large backpack. He proudly declares the shopping complete, leaving Johann amazed that 1 silver coin bought everything. First, they secure Johann a tactical belt bag for easier access to gear. They also get Godin a large supply backpack, making storage and travel far more practical. Using his merchant's tongue, Godin sells Johann's shattered helm for an unexpectedly high price. He even gets a mace for free and still buys oil, vinegar, and preservation supplies while keeping change. By the end of it, they somehow have more money than when they started. That success makes Johann realize the buried equipment from Karamov's old gear could be worth a fortune too. He decides that if he ever returns there, he should dig it up and sell it. Impressed, Johann tells Godin he looks happy doing familiar work and asks whether he truly liked being a merchant. Godin admits with emotion that he missed this kind of life. He remembers the terror of slavery, living every day unsure when death would come. Now that he has met Johann, he feels as if he has returned to the life he had before becoming a slave. Godin thanks Johann sincerely and says he would have chosen to travel with him regardless. Johann is moved by that loyalty and tells Godin he will rely on him from now on. Godin happily accepts Johann's trust without hesitation. With their bond strengthened, they decide to go explore Marcel together. For Johann, who has known only hardship, arriving in Marcel feels like entering a happiness far beyond his wandering life. He revels in something as simple as biting into rich, tender meat. Compared with the miserable jerky of his travels, Marcel's food feels impossibly luxurious. He remembers how filthy and miserable he was on the road, unable even to bathe while his whole body itched. In Marcel, by contrast, he can wash in warm water whenever he wants. He also recalls how wandering meant sleeping on damp, freezing stone with no proper shelter. Now Marcel offers him warm beds and soft blankets instead. Overwhelmed by comfort, Johann briefly decides he wants to settle down and live in Marcel for good. Yet even as he dreams of a peaceful future there, fate is already preparing to deny it. The next day in Marcel's city square, that fragile peace begins to crack. Johann casually enjoys another meat skewer, still savoring the city's comforts. Walking the streets at ease with Godin and tiny Karamov, he thinks life has finally become peaceful. Then Johann senses trouble and immediately realizes something is wrong. Nearby townspeople speak fearfully of another bandit attack and the kidnapping of a merchant's daughter. They confirm that this time the raiders took Dave's daughter along with the incoming goods. As Johann listens, the townsfolk despair that tomorrow's news may be even worse. Their fear makes clear that Marcel's people cannot live without constant anxiety while bandits roam free. Godin notes that bandits plague Marcel too, and Johann curses the city's rotten atmosphere. At that moment, a ragged armed man erupts into the square, screaming over an unpaid meat skewer. The starving attacker insists he only wanted 1 skewer because he has not eaten in 4 days. Johann recognizes the danger at once. The man is a stray from the wolves of Akiton who lost the main pursuit and drifted into Marcel while trying to survive. The mercenary starts to repeat his excuse, then notices Johann and falters in shock. Johann instantly understands he has been recognized. The starving mercenary points at him in horrified realization. Recognition turns to rage as the man lunges at Johann, calling him a bastard. Johann panics internally, realizing the wolves of Akiton have tracked him all the way to Marcel. He knows that if he fights openly here, nothing good can come of it. The mercenary raises his weapon and charges in for the kill anyway. Before Johann can act, a blade flashes across the square. A mounted swordsman cuts the attacker down in a single stroke, ending the threat instantly. The crowd recoils in shock as the body collapses. A rider remarks that the dead man was no true bandit, just another desperate criminal emerging amid failing security. The rider then addresses Johann directly and checks whether he was hurt. Godin answers politely that Johann is unharmed, while Johann stays tense and silent. The rider smiles and advises Johann to stay careful. With that, he spurs his horse onward and departs. Johann notices the man's knowing smile and feels uneasy about the encounter. A booming call then addresses the citizens of Marseille. Soldiers march into formation as the square is seized by military order. An entire mercenary force assembles publicly in Marseille under its banners. Their leader introduces himself as Brattle, captain of the Oak Tree Mercenaries. Brattle promises that his 500 mercenaries will wipe out the bandits and restore Marseille's safety. Godin is thrilled to see such famous mercenaries in person and asks if they are truly renowned. Johann confirms that the Oak Tree Mercenaries are one of the Empire's top groups. Godin innocently assumes they must have been hired to eliminate the bandits threatening Marseille. Johann falls silent, his thoughts darkening. He realizes that if the mounted man had not intervened earlier, his identity might have been exposed on the spot. And if that happened before he secured protection, he would have been forced to flee Marseille and lose everything. He remembers the brutal truth that exposure would condemn him to nothing but suffering again. That thought hardens Johann's expression. He reminds himself that he is still a fugitive, and that survival depends on building ties with the Katana Trading Company. He reasons that even the Emperor cannot casually crush someone shielded by a powerful trading company. Because Eldens thinks well of him, Johann believes he has a chance to approach Marcel's branch of that company. Still, he fears everything will collapse if his identity is revealed before he secures their backing. If the company learns the Empire is hunting him too soon, he is certain they will never protect him. So he concludes that exposure before gaining Katana's trust would mean certain death. His objective becomes clear: reach the Katana Trading Company and obtain protection from the Empire. Until he wins that trust, he vows that his true identity must never be revealed. Just then, a maid approaches him on the street and asks if he is Sir Johann. She identifies herself as a servant of the Katana Trading Company. The maid introduces herself as Abelka. She says Eldens told them about Johann's deeds and that the company wants to form a close bond with him and his house. Then she invites him to accompany her to the Katana Trading Company at once. Johann arrives at the Marseille branch of the Katana Trading Company. Outside, Godin plays with tiny Karamov while the little beast nips at him, and Johann leaves them behind to enter. Inside a richly furnished room, Johann waits alone for the meeting that could change his fate. He tells himself this company may be his chance to change his life, if the negotiations go well. A new voice enters, already knowing his name and saying Eldens spoke of him. Johann turns as the speaker asks to introduce herself formally. She reveals herself as Ian, the branch manager of Katana's Marseille office. The introduction confirms that Johann is now dealing directly with the branch's highest authority. Johann politely presents himself as Johann of House Yates, and the manager returns the courtesy. Ian invites him to sit and discuss matters over a drink, and Johann agrees. She presents a dark imported beverage as if it were tea from a distant region. Ian hopes the drink suits his taste, testing him as much as hosting him. Johann immediately recognizes that the supposed tea is actually coffee, but thanks her calmly. He even identifies how it is made, earning Ian's praise for his perceptiveness. Satisfied, Ian drops the small test and moves the conversation to business. She says the company already understands why Johann has come. Johann panics inwardly, fearing they may somehow know the Emperor is hunting him. Instead, Ian explains that the reason is something else entirely. She declares that Johann carries ambition in his heart. Johann is left baffled by the claim. Ian says Eldens reported that Johann protected innocents and spared enemies who surrendered. From that, and from his arrival in a city plagued by bandits, she concludes that Johann wants to save Marseille with his own hands. Though he has no idea what she is talking about, Johann decides to play along and pretends she has seen through him. Ian praises ambition as a virtue possessed by those who are truly worthy. She adds that Katana loves to sponsor the ambitions of worthy people. Johann instantly realizes this is the opening for a deal. Ian tempts him further by offering not only sponsorship but even an introduction to Marseille's governor. Johann is stunned, realizing that with both the company and the governor behind him, even imperial pressure might be blunted. He becomes convinced he must accept whatever this offer is if it can secure that level of protection. Still, he carefully asks what sponsorship from Katana actually entails. Ian explains that sponsorship means full access to the company's services, from inns and restaurants to entertainment, all under Katana's name. Then she warns that there is one condition attached. To explain it, she invokes the image of a knight fighting beneath the company's banner. Her condition is that Johann must fight under Katana's banner whenever the company requires his aid. Johann assumes that means dealing with the bandits threatening Marseille, but Ian immediately denies it. She says the Oak Tree mercenaries have already been sent for the bandits, and Katana wants something else from him. Johann grows wary as he asks what that other task could be. Ian's smile turns cold and predatory. She explains that more and more shop districts resent Katana and accuse the company of monopolizing the market. To silence that opposition, she wants Johann to eliminate those disgruntled merchants, and preferably their children as well. Having laid out the atrocity plainly, she asks whether he will accept. Johann answers only with a long, stunned silence. His face hardens as he weighs the offer against his conscience. Outside, the Katana branch stands serene beneath the evening sky, hiding the ugliness within. A moment later, Johann storms out of the building without accepting the deal. Godin and Tiny Karamov greet his return eagerly, asking how the meeting went as Johann comes back carrying the weight of what he heard. At sunset, a dark-haired knight stands lost in thought, carrying the weight of plans already in motion. Godin notices his distant mood and nervously calls Johann back to the present. Johann answers with a small, knowing smile that hides how much he is calculating. He suddenly turns cheerful and invites Godin to celebrate by enjoying Katana's money. Godin is baffled by Johann's strange phrasing and tries to make sense of it. An hour earlier, Johann had been seated in Katana's Marcel branch for a decisive meeting. When asked to dirty his hands, Johann flatly refused. He first challenged the premise, saying complaints about distribution in a large city could be natural. But when the company framed the issue as a reason to slaughter rivals and even their children, he rejected them outright. Johann made clear that he would not kill innocents for profit and refused the deal. Ready to walk away, he tried to end the meeting as if it had never happened. The cat-eared representative studied him in silence, measuring his character. Johann held her gaze, still expecting hostility. Instead, her expression softened with approval. She declared that he had passed, leaving Johann stunned by the sudden reversal. She explained that the murder request had only been a test of whether he was worthy of Katana's sponsorship, not a real assignment. Then she revealed the earlier accusations were fabricated as well, insisting Katana had no monopoly and was in fact respected for fair trade. With the test over, she said the original sponsorship terms still stood and that Johann would not need to fight immediately. She added that the Oak Tree mercenaries were already handling the bandits, so Johann could rest and enjoy Katana's support for now. Finally, she offered him a formal partnership and asked if he would join hands with her company. Johann's smile returned as he instantly saw the opportunity. He accepted at once, dropping all hesitation now that the offer benefited him. Their handshake sealed the arrangement as both sides hoped the meeting would profit them. Back outside, Johann kept mulling over his own odd phrase and wondered what it really meant. He explained to Godin that it simply meant going out to eat something expensive on Katana's tab. As they walked away with their small beast companion, Johann happily confirmed that the negotiations had succeeded and he was finally sponsored. Godin celebrated his success, and Johann thanked him with rare warmth. Johann felt everything in Marcel was falling perfectly into place the moment he arrived. He reassured himself that once the Oak Tree mercenaries eliminated the troublesome bandits, the city would become peaceful again. Convinced his long-awaited comfortable life was near, he decided it was finally time to relax and enjoy himself. That dream shattered when a scream tore through the street ahead of them. A fly landed on bloodied flesh, signaling something horrific before Johann even saw it clearly. The stench and gore came into focus as insects crawled over the dead. A mutilated hand lying in a pool of blood confirmed the massacre was fresh and public. Several corpses had been dumped in the open while horrified townspeople gathered around them. Johann froze in shock as the scene destroyed his fantasy of a peaceful Marcel. He could not understand why dead bodies were being displayed so openly, and the crowd's grief only deepened the dread. A man named Goran recognized Johann and approached him amid the chaos. Goran explained that the bandits around Marcel had recently become far more violent. He said they were murdering merchants' families and dumping the bodies in the city to terrorize Marcel itself. Johann cursed under his breath as he realized the situation was spiraling instead of being resolved. Around them, angry citizens concluded that Marcel had failed to protect them and demanded the city be held responsible. Others rejected that blame and insisted rumors that the emperor was provoking the bandits were absurd. The crowd split further between defenders of imperial authority and those who could no longer believe in the emperor's innocence. The argument exploded into accusations of blasphemy, tyranny, senility, and treason until the whole street became a political riot. Johann bitterly realized his peaceful new life in Marcel was already being ruined before it had even begun. He turned his frustration toward the absent mercenaries, wondering what they were doing while the city fell apart. Elsewhere, the doors of Katana's branch opened as urgent news arrived. A maid rushed in to report disaster to the branch manager, Ian, while the cat-eared executive was already reading the situation. The executive cut in that she already knew about the bodies and demanded to know what the Oak Tree mercenaries were doing. The maid hesitated, dreading the answer she had to give. When she admitted they had completely lost contact with the mercenaries, the executive was stunned. The maid added that their liaison had been found dead near the forest outside Marcel, horribly mutilated. The executive fell silent, grasping the seriousness of what that implied. She reasoned that a force as strong as the Oak Tree mercenaries should never have been defeated by an ordinary bandit gang. Snapping into action, she barked orders at once. She demanded that Swetelga, the sage of the Ifil River, be summoned to determine through prophecy whether the mercenaries had truly fallen. Far away at the moonlit Ifil River, the sage listened to the water's secret voice. Reading the river's mystery, he quickly understood what had happened. He concluded that Katana was looking in the wrong place, and that searching for the mercenaries would change nothing. The river showed him instead that the man who killed the Emperor's hunting dog and fled was now hiding inside Marcel's purse. Recognizing Johann's role in the future, the sage decided events would not unfold as that man expected. The next day at Katana's Marcel branch, storm clouds hung over the building as fate closed in. Inside, someone arrived quietly at the threshold. The old sage stepped through the doorway and announced himself with calm authority. A maid named Nyatsi recognized him at once, startled by his sudden presence. She welcomed Lord Swetelga respectfully, and thanked him for answering Katana's request. Swetelga dryly noted that such gratitude rang hollow after they had sent a carriage driver reckless enough to nearly break his back. When Nyatsi tried to fetch Ayan, Swetelga stopped her and said there was no need. He reasoned that if the matter were truly urgent, Ayan would have come personally. Then he coldly warned her not to make him repeat himself, forcing immediate obedience. Seated and in control, Swetelga waited as if he had already chosen whom he wished to meet. He explained that the Eifel River had shown him he would encounter someone important here. That someone was Johann, who arrived outside in plain clothes with his little beast companion. Johann looked up at the governor's residence, and told himself that today would decide his future in Marseille. He was determined to win the governor's favor, settle down for good, and finally escape a life of wandering and imperial pursuit. With that resolve, he stepped inside. As he walked the halls, he wondered what kind of person the governor might be and regretted not asking Ayan for details. His beast companion suddenly bristled and growled, sensing something before Johann did. An old man appeared and immediately identified the creature as a divine beast, making Johann realize this was no ordinary official. Johann stared at him in alarm, unable to understand how the stranger knew that much. The old man's certainty made it clear he truly recognized the beast's nature. Johann demanded to know who he was, while the stranger noted that Johann clearly did not know him. The man introduced himself as Swetelga, sage of the Eifel River. Johann struggled to place what a sage even meant in this world. When Swetelga simplified it by saying he was a mage, Johann's confusion instantly turned into excitement. Johann remembered that this world truly had magic, and the possibility thrilled him. Meeting a mage on the very day he came to see the governor felt like unbelievable luck to him. He enthusiastically declared it an honor and practically threw himself at Swetelga in excitement. The old mage, flustered by such intense admiration, could only awkwardly respond. Then Swetelga casually revealed he knew Johann was being hunted by the emperor, shocking him again. He explained that through the mystery of the Eifel River he could see both past and future. Johann immediately asked whether Swetelga intended to report him. Swetelga dismissed the idea, asking why he would bother with such a thing. Johann was caught off guard by how little the mage cared about imperial politics. Swetelga said he was merely a seeker of nature's mysteries and had no interest in secular power struggles. Only the voice of the Eifel River moved him, leaving Johann to realize this man followed an entirely different set of priorities. He added that if he had wanted to expose Johann, he would have done it quietly rather than announcing it to his face. Johann accepted that logic at once and relaxed, seeing no immediate threat. Seizing the chance, he begged Swetelga to teach him about magic. Swetelga was bewildered by how eagerly this supposedly hunted knight latched onto the subject. He reflected that most knights would mock mages as cowardly scholars, not cling to them with shining eyes. That contrast made Johann seem even stranger to him. Johann pressed on, asking how magic worked and whether an ordinary person like him could learn it. Inwardly he decided this was his chance to become a magic swordsman and raise his odds of survival. Swetelga agreed to explain, saying their meeting was fated and there was no reason to hide the basics. But he refused to give the knowledge away freely and proposed a condition instead. Johann guessed the challenge might be chess and tried to steer it towards something physical like arm wrestling instead. His suggestion only earned him a painful rebuke for trying to use brute strength against an old man. Swetelga dryly pointed out that arm wrestling would obviously favor Johann, and told him to follow if he wanted the real game. He said that while the game of kings was enjoyable, it could not compare to the game of gods. The so-called game of gods turned out to be a go board. Swetelga set out the bowls of stones and prepared the match with practiced ease. Johann recognized the board at once and realized this challenge suited him far better than the mage expected. He identified the game as Go and immediately saw a path to victory. Swetelga told him to sit, assuming he was about to instruct a complete beginner. The mage asked if the game looked difficult and promised to go easy on him. Johann privately thanked his luck for handing him such an unexpected advantage. He remembered having once won a high-level Go tournament in his previous life and became confident he could win. As he drew his first stones, he resolved to crush the old man no matter how skilled he might be. Johann's confidence hardened into certainty that he would beat him. Swetelga, unaware of the trap, opened with what he considered a simple and gentle move. Johann politely thanked him while inwardly preparing to take everything the mage had promised. He imagined claiming Swetelga's knowledge of magic as his prize. 50 minutes later, the board told a very different story from what the mage had expected. Johann sat tense and focused while Swetelga stared at the position in disbelief. Johann cautiously addressed him, sensing the old man's growing desperation. Swetelga shamelessly begged to undo a few moves, but Johann refused because he had already been granted too many takebacks. The mage slammed the board in frustration, unable to accept that he was losing at his own sacred game. He demanded to know whether this was truly Johann's first time playing, insisting even great rulers had not surpassed him. Johann deflected with flattery, saying Swetelga taught so well that he had learned quickly. Yet the old man, unwilling to lose, asked for just one more game. He sweetened the offer by promising a gift that would help Johann in life if he lost again. Johann immediately wondered whether that gift might be a magic item and agreed to continue. Trying to preserve his pride, Swetelga asked how many handicap stones Johann wanted. Embarrassed, he settled on giving only 3, pretending that would be enough. Johann accepted, and the second game began. As the match resumed, Swetelga casually asked why a noble-born fugitive like Johann was so interested in magic. Johann answered honestly that with the Emperor after his head, he wanted every possible tool for survival. That answer made Swetelga abruptly warn that if Johann sought magic for combat, their discussion should end there because that was not what he could offer. Johann was stunned to hear that magic was not meant for fighting at all. Swetelga clarified that while some people do apply it to combat, his own knowledge was of a different kind. When Johann kept interrupting with excitement, Swetelga sharply ordered him to listen first. He began explaining that what people call mages are mainly those who uncover the hidden mysteries within nature. Some find such mysteries in wind, others in fire, and still others in smoke and sulfur. He even mocked a certain fool who once bragged about discovering a mystery in the Black Forest, hinting at old grudges. Those discovered mysteries, he said, are called spirits, and mages borrow their power. Usually spirits lend that power freely, but at times their whims demand a fatal price from those who invoke them. So even if Johann ever encountered such a mystery, Swetelga warned him never to defy its will. Hearing that magic here meant bargaining with dangerous spirits rather than gaining safe power, Johann quietly abandoned his dream of becoming a magic swordsman and doubted magic items were even real. News spreads in panic that Lord Swetelga has arrived, sending the staff rushing to receive him. The cat branch manager scolds her maids for hiding his visit, blaming a stubborn mage for delaying an urgent report. She spots him at last and hurries to greet him. Instead of official business, she finds Lord Swetelga tormenting Sir Johann with a divine board game, while a sinister aura fills the room. Realizing Swetelga is actually losing, she freezes in disbelief. The old sage begs for one move to be undone, and Johann awkwardly tries to interrupt the game for Swetelga's sake. The branch manager is stunned that even Lord Swetelga can be cornered in this contest. Johann cheerfully presses the sage to accept defeat, making the manager wonder what kind of man he really is. Only then does the sage notice Swetelga has been present the whole time. The branch manager warmly welcomes Swetelga to Marcel and teasingly asks whether he enjoyed his time with Johann. Swetelga brushes it off as a few casual games with a knight, and the manager accepts the excuse. With the manager now here, Swetelga ends the game and sweeps the board away. Johann is left speechless as the match is abruptly terminated. Swetelga instead places two mysterious flasks before Johann. Johann asks what these unexpected gifts are. Swetelga reveals they are the final secrets of the Eifel River, the water of wrath, and the water of blessing. Elsewhere, at the Oak Tree Mercenaries' outpost, a dark omen hangs over the night. One mercenary stares ahead in terror as something impossible approaches. The mercenaries realize the figure before them is no ordinary bandit and panic. A shadow with glowing eyes emerges from the forest path and advances on them. The horror takes the shape of a warped, smiling female apparition. Behind her looms an even larger monstrous presence, confirming the mercenaries are facing something unnatural. The men understand too late that their enemy is far beyond a human raider. One of them can only stare as death closes in. A single violent strike cuts through the night. Back in Marseille, the Katana Trading Company branch stands as the center of the coming response. Johann repeats the names of the two flasks, trying to grasp their significance. Swetelga explains that the Eifel River has long concealed the secret of life and death, a mystery he pursued all his life without success. He says the river finally yielded its answer only after Johann appeared. Swetelga clarifies that the red water can heal nearly any wound, while the green can dissolve a person with a single drop. Johann gratefully accepts the miraculous items, relieved that such potions truly exist. The branch manager then turns the conversation to the prophecy and the bandit crisis around Marseille. She reports that the Oak Tree mercenaries were sent to suppress the bandits, but have not answered for days. Before she can finish wondering if they merely failed, Swetelga states they were wiped out 3 days earlier. The branch manager is shocked by how certain he sounds. Swetelga recites the river's prophecy that southeast of Marseille the oak trees would be crushed by steel and fall before flames engulf the city. He concludes from that prophecy that the Oak Tree mercenaries are almost certainly dead. The branch manager decides the matter now requires a city council meeting and tells Johann he must act under the council's banner. Johann accepts, though he remains uneasy. The council chamber is prepared for an emergency gathering. Council members begin arriving in haste. Among them comes a flamboyant noble whose theatrical manner immediately stands out. He breezes in late without shame and seizes the room's attention. Declaring the council open in the emperor's name, Baron Einbeck Vivant Auvergne takes command of the proceedings. His absurdly curled mustache becomes Johann's first unforgettable impression. Johann privately judges the Baron ridiculous and decides this era is full of eccentrics. Another voice formally greets the council, shifting attention away from Johann's thoughts. The city's governor, Velako Trainieni, introduces himself with calm authority. Johann instantly decides that winning Velako's favor is essential if he wants a safe life in Marseille. Velako thanks the gathered influential families of Marseille for attending the emergency session. Before discussing the crisis, he announces that he wishes to introduce a noble to the council. Johann is presented as a member of House Yates, now sponsored by the Katana Trading Company, leaving the room to size him up. Trying to sound respectable, Johann introduces himself and promises to do his best. The council answers with polite but guarded applause rather than trust. Johann sits back down under the weight of their scrutiny. Baron Einbeck quickly pivots to the failed mercenary expedition and demands an explanation from the governor. He argues that if Marcel had sought the Emperor's help from the beginning, the problem would already be solved. The anti-Emperor faction erupts in protest, insisting the Emperor caused the chaos and should bear the cost. The pro-Emperor faction shouts back that insulting the Emperor in a crisis is blasphemous. As both sides descend into accusations and conspiracy claims, Johann can only tune out the political noise. He realizes many people here openly support the Emperor, which means exposure could put him in mortal danger again. The Laco watches the uproar in silence, measuring the room. With a single cold request for order, he instantly suppresses the entire chamber. The hall falls quiet under the governor's authority. Johann is startled by how completely Villaco controls the council. The branch manager politely resumes the discussion on Villaco's behalf. She says the governor understands everyone's fears and has already prepared a backup plan. That plan is to form a second subjugation force and strike the bandits at their source. The council explodes in shock at the scale of the proposal. Baron Einbeck immediately praises Villaco's wisdom and frames the plan as proof of loyalty to the Emperor. He offers imperial troops at a word, implying the Emperor stands ready to intervene. Johann panics internally at the thought of imperial soldiers, imagining capture and execution. Villaco calmly asks Einbeck to lower the pressure, acknowledging his past support while keeping control of the conversation. He then politely but firmly refuses the offer of imperial troops. Villaco explains that the Emperor is occupied by a northern rebellion and says Marcel should lighten that burden itself. He declares that Marcel will instead organize a new mercenary force with Johann included in it. Einbeck masks his displeasure behind a smile and hopes the Emperor will remember Villaco's loyalty. Johann is overwhelmed with relief that imperial troops will not be called in. Even so, he notices Einbeck's closeness to Villaco and worries his safety is still uncertain. Remembering Eldens's claim that even the Emperor could not easily touch Marcel, Johann realizes the truth is far more complicated. Villaco closes the meeting and invites the council members to continue at a tea gathering. As the others disperse, Einbeck lingers with an knowing smile. Villaco then asks Johann to stay behind for a private talk. Johann nervously agrees and follows him. Alone with the governor, Johann considers fleeing if Villaco truly serves the Emperor. He curses his terrible luck and fears he may be forced back into wandering. Villaco leads him to his office while Einbeck watches them go with suspicion. The Baron's expression hardens, clearly unconvinced by what he has seen. Inside the office, Villaco invites Johann to sit, beginning the private interview. He first asks Johann to repeat what house he claimed to belong to. Johann sticks to the lie and introduces himself again as Johann Yates of House Yates. He braces for the governor's reaction, hoping the false name will pass. Instead, Villaco instantly recognizes the name and reacts with unsettling enthusiasm. He explains that House Yates is a real northern family famous for date palm liquor, leaving Johann horrified that his fake identity accidentally matched reality. Villaco says the timing is perfect because he happens to have liquor from that very house. He prepares 2 glasses before Johann can object. Offering the drink, Villaco remarks that Johann must miss home. Johann forces a smile and accepts the glass while sweating through the trap. They drink together as Villaco quietly studies every reaction. Johann pretends the taste stirs nostalgia, even though he has never heard of such liquor before. Villaco laughs pleasantly, encouraging the performance. Then he casually asks whether House Yates has survived the Emperor's northern purge. He notes that the Emperor's blade swept through the north and calls it a tragedy. The mention of the purge brings Johann back to the memory of a city consumed by flames. Villaco continues that many noble houses were destroyed and their survivors scattered into banditry. He adds that among those ruined houses, one survivor is wanted for treason. Dropping the pretense, he reveals that the house in question was House Yates. Johann feigns ignorance and claims he has never heard that name before. Villaco's red eye sharpens, showing he sees through the lie. He laughs off the tension as if he merely pushed the conversation too far. Johann hurriedly plays along and insists there is nothing to worry about. Villaco changes tone again and asks whether Johann knows what he really just drank. He reveals the liquor was not House Yates' specialty at all, but cheap local whiskey. Johann realizes he has been completely exposed. Villaco abandons the wordplay and directly names him as Johann Yates. Johann jolts upright, unable to deny it any longer. Villaco says he will not hand Johann over to the Emperor, at least not yet. He immediately undercuts that mercy by admitting he still might if circumstances demand it. Johann demands to know what Villaco really intends. Villaco answers that every choice he makes is for Marcel's benefit alone. He insists Marcel cannot blindly commit to either the pro-Emperor or anti-Emperor faction. Instead, he will balance both sides while focusing first on the immediate threat of the bandit gang. He orders Johann to wipe the bandits out, earn merit, and prove that Marcel has reason to protect him. If Johann fails, Villaco warns, he will personally send him to the Emperor. Later, Johann slumps over the city wall, crushed by the burden now hanging over him. He laments that Marcel was supposed to be a refuge, only to become another chain, and wonders whether running away is wiser. Memories of pursuit, violence, and constant flight flash through his mind as he weighs that choice. He rejects escape, deciding that if nothing is free, he will win Villaco's favor and claim a place in Marcel by force of merit. A young attendant interrupts his resolve by pointing out the newly assembled subjugation force. Johann asks if these are the men Velako gathered for him. Before them stands Marcel's second bandit subjugation force, ready to march. The attendant identifies the first contingent as the Red Iron Mercenaries and the Saint Aina Monastery. He adds that the Saint Galanto Monastery has joined as well. Johann is amazed that so many major groups answered the call and asks whether they are truly that renowned. The attendant explains that Saint Galanto is a male holy order famous for alchemy. He says Saint Aina is a female holy order powerful enough to hunt trolls. He describes the Red Iron Mercenaries as honorable, loyal dwarves who excel in siege warfare yet remain practical and open-minded. He then points out Count Bartok's elven knights, famed for bravery and skill. Johann bluntly remarks that elves are usually insufferably rude, embarrassing the attendant. After the attendant apologizes, Johann shrugs it off and decides to inspect the people he will be fighting beside. Marcel's banner snaps in the wind over the assembled force. The dwarven Captain Kummel loudly calls for Lady Ian, announcing himself with booming confidence. The branch manager introduces Johann to Captain Kummel as the trading company's knight and entrusts him to the captain's care. Johann tries to stay formal, but Kummel tells him not to worry about ceremony and to speak freely. Kummel assures him that casual speech will not diminish his authority before his men. Johann accepts the offer, grateful for the unexpected ease. Kummel then turns to the Holy Knights and asks how they intend to move with the force. The commanders answer that they will march together with Kummel's men. The two Holy Vanguard leaders are introduced as Valin of Saint Aina and Agante of Saint Galanto. Kummel formally thanks the Holy Knights for agreeing to join the campaign, sealing the alliance for the coming battle. Johann notes that the dwarf captain's insistence on consent over command likely comes from dealing with arrogant nobles, though he still respects the dwarf for being reasonable. When the branch manager is challenged over why so many troops were assembled, Johann and the catered manager turn to the approaching voices. Mounted riders arrive at the gathering point, announcing the entrance of outside noble forces. A Bartok knight named Gustav declares that his group alone should be enough for the coming fight. His fellow Bartok knights Laurent and Leon smugly agree, trusting Count Bartok's judgment and dismissing the need for others. Gustav pauses as he notices Johann among the company's forces. He singles Johann out and asks whether he is the knight fighting under the trading company's banner. Johann confirms his name as Johann of House Yates. Gustav has never heard of the house and immediately treats Johann as insignificant. He openly insults Johann's lineage and warns that if Johann obstructs them in battle, they will show no mercy. Johann coldly accepts the threat and makes it clear he will remember the insult. The Bartok Knights also reject the dwarf captain's authority, mocking him and declaring they will not take orders from him during the battle. Gustav then grandly orders the branch manager to prepare a send-off feast in his honor, and the manager obediently agrees. Satisfied, the Bartok Knights ride off toward their own men, leaving Johann and the others behind. Johann realizes this kind of noble arrogance is exactly why the dwarf captain had worried about command authority. Still, seeing the company's own lineup and support from priests, Johann thinks the battle against the bandits should still go well despite the obnoxious nobles. A young servant quietly approaches the catered branch manager with a message meant for Johann. She leans in and whispers the summons into the manager's ear. The manager relays that someone wants to meet Johann that evening. Johann is surprised the invitation is for him, and wonders if it is Velako again. The manager hesitates nervously instead of answering directly, which immediately makes the request feel suspicious. That night, on the eve of the second bandit suppression force's departure, the camp near Marcel erupts into a rowdy send-off feast where soldiers are told to eat and drink without worrying about tomorrow. The elven knights indulge in drink and women while boasting that refusing such pleasures is shameful for an elf. They toast the certain death of their enemies and brag that swords and courage matter more than unreliable magic. An older onlooker can only sweat and lament how insufferable knights are. Johann reflects that among nobles, refusing a drink can be taken as an insult. He understands that accepting a drink is treated as proof of trust, while refusal suggests suspicion. Even so, he goes to the appointed room and knocks, and a voice invites him inside. Johann opens the door and enters the private chamber. Inside, a hooded guest tells him to sit first instead of answering who requested the meeting. Seeing liquor prepared again, Johann inwardly groans at how often nobles in this world seem to drink. He consoles himself that at least this alcohol looks better than the cheap whiskey Velako once used to test him, though the memory still irritates him. The hooded man quickly reveals he knows Johann is marching out tomorrow and bluntly suggests money must be his real motive. Johann laughs off the rude assumption and demands to know who this man is before entertaining such questions. The stranger theatrically throws back his cloak to reveal himself. He introduces himself as Baron Einbeck, a loyal subject of the Emperor of the Holy Empire. That declaration immediately puts Johann on alert. Einbeck explains that although Marcel claims neutrality, in practice it behaves like an anti-Emperor faction. He asks whether Johann understands why he sought him out now, and Johann flatly says he does not. Einbeck is momentarily thrown off by Johann's bluntness. Johann apologizes for not following complicated political talk and decides he should keep his head down and leave before being dragged into imperial factionalism. Einbeck laughs, says he expected that reaction, and begins lecturing Johann that merchants ultimately care about only two things. He names those two things as profit and strength. From that, Einbeck concludes that if the katana trading company backs Johann, then Johann must be the company's strength, a man who truly knows how to fight. Johann asks why Einbeck is so certain of that assessment. Einbeck answers that he investigated Johann and found no trace of House Yates. Johann is startled that yet another person has seen through his false identity. Einbeck adds that while House Yates does not exist, a similarly named House Yates once did. He reveals that House Yates was exterminated for treason against the Emperor, with not only the Lord but even the serfs put to death. Einbeck argues that a nameless house means nothing to a trading company, so Marcel must have accepted Johann solely because of his strength. Johann stops dodging and asks directly what Einbeck wants from him. Einbeck tells him not to join tomorrow's bandit suppression and instead use his strength for the Emperor, promising a reward greater than any trading company could offer. Johann remains silent, forcing Einbeck to sweeten the offer. Einbeck paints a vision of Johann entering the Empire's core and receiving formal knighthood. He adds the promise of a broad and fertile domain of his own. He insists that if Johann follows him and the Emperor, only glory and peace await. Then Einbeck reveals his true creed, claiming the world naturally belongs to the strong while the weak are meant to bleed and die. He grows emotional over his own brutal philosophy, mistaking Johann's silence for agreement. Delighted, Einbeck praises Johann for understanding that the loser is always at fault. Johann finally answers with a quiet, absolute refusal. Einbeck is stunned that Johann rejected him outright. Johann then recalls that a few months earlier, a man bearing the Emperor's command entered his domain. That envoy slaughtered Johann's innocent family and people, turning the meeting into a confession of old hatred. Johann says that same man once offered him a similar bargain and asked him to become the Emperor's sword. He refused that offer too, and now asks Einbeck if he knows the crucial difference between then and now. Johann answers it himself by revealing that the Emperor's direct knight died by his hand. Einbeck is horrified by the implication. Johann states without hesitation that he crushed the Emperor's direct knight for the sake of the serfs who had been treated like worms. The memory of that killing hangs between them like a threat made real. Einbeck panics as he realizes Johann killed Karamov, the Emperor's knight. Johann confirms that he is the surviving member of the annihilated House Yates. The revelation leaves Einbeck trembling in fear. Johann calmly reaches for the cup on the table. He drinks from it in front of Einbeck, who can only stare in disbelief and call the act foolish. Johann crushes the metal cup in his hand as his anger surges. He slams his fist through the table, turning his threat into a display of monstrous strength. Einbeck recoils in terror, as Johann's bare-handed power destroys both cup and furniture. Johann declares he will wipe out the bandits for himself, not for the Emperor and not for Marcel. He warns Einbeck to tell no one what happened that night, or next time Johann will crush him instead of a cup and table. Johann storms out, leaving the room shaking behind him. As he leaves, he fumes that Einbeck thinks he can say anything he wants and still get his way. But before Johann can go far, someone steps into his path. Johann senses something wrong and looks up in confusion. Suddenly his chest burns and his breathing fails, as if his body is shutting down from within. He clutches at himself in shock as the symptoms hit all at once. The truth dawns on him too late. Johann realizes the drink was poisoned. He collapses, cursing his own mistake as blood spills onto the floor. Lying there, he bitterly admits he never expected to be brought down like this. Elsewhere, Einbeck regains his composure and his malice returns. A cruel smile spreads across his face as he savors Johann's fall. Outside at the gathering grounds, the feast still continues under the night sky, unaware of what has happened. A timid young servant is being teased and pawed at by three women who mock his slight build and invite him to join them instead of staying with old men. They press him into humiliatingly intimate play, insisting he come do something pleasurable with them. Overwhelmed and disgusted, the servant breaks free and runs away. The women only laugh at his escape and joke that they wanted to dress him up. The servant, Godin, races through the halls calling for Johann and saying the place is too frightening. Still crying, he says Svetlana is also having a hard time and begs to go back quickly. Then he notices a hand lying motionless ahead of him. The sight freezes him in instant terror. He rushes to Johann's side and screams his name. Seeing Johann bleeding heavily and barely conscious, Godin cannot understand what happened. He cradles Johann and desperately shouts for help, convinced Johann is about to die. Godin begs Johann to hold on, and keeps calling his name in panic. In his fading state, Johann hears the cries as if from far away. Driven by survival instinct, he drags himself to a nearby bucket and forces himself to vomit. After purging the poison, Johann rises shakily while Godin watches in stunned relief. Godin blurts out his name, amazed that Johann is still responding. He quickly pours a healing potion Svetlana had given them and urges Johann to drink it at once. Later, once stabilized, Johann thanks Godin for finding him and admits that the servant's quick action saved his life, while Godin shyly says he only panicked and happened to have blessed water. Johann also thanks Svetlana, acknowledging that without the water of blessing he would certainly have died. The old healer scolds Johann for doing something so reckless as seeking out Baron Einbeck despite knowing he belonged to the pro-emperor faction. He dryly adds that if Johann insists on reckless behavior again, he should at least die quickly so the remaining blessed water can be conserved, and Johann can only accept the rebuke awkwardly. Once the scolding ends, the healer asks whether Johann managed to catch Einbeck, since proving the charges will require the Baron himself. Johann admits that by the time he reached the place Einbeck had already fled. Enraged, Johann roars for Einbeck to come out and face him. He charges through the halls after the fleeing Baron, vowing he will no longer hold back against the man who poisoned him. 2 armored men intercept him and say the target has already escaped, while one of them bitterly remarks that this is simply how nobles live. Johann pauses when he notices something they left behind. On the floor lies a sealed document that Einbeck dropped in his haste. Johann picks it up and says he may not have caught the Baron, but he found something more important. He explains that the papers Einbeck could not carry away contain the full truth behind the incident. The healer asks whether the documents prove the rumor that the Emperor hired the bandits. Johann answers no, because what is written there is even more serious. Meanwhile, under the moonlight, Einbeck rides hard toward the Imperial-aligned camp. He gallops through the night, desperate to reach safety before Johann can recover. As he rides, Einbeck smugly assumes Johann Eitz is probably dead by now. He congratulates himself that everything is proceeding exactly as the Emperor intended. At the camp entrance, Imperial mercenaries recognize Einbeck and open the way for him. He is welcomed by the gathered soldiers, who treat him as an honored ally. Einbeck steps forward to address the assembled force. A vast crowd of armed mercenaries and soldiers answers his presence with a thunderous roar. He begins by correcting them that they are not mere bandits. Instead, he proclaims them mercenaries of the strongest empire, bound by imperial gold and superior strength. He invokes the Holy Empire and promises dazzling glory to all who swear loyalty to the great emperor. Boasting proudly, Einbeck says he has long undermined Marcel from within and now holds all of its plans and strategies in his hand. He exults that Marcel has already fallen into chaos and will die without even knowing who truly destroyed it. The army erupts in savage cheers at his declaration. Einbeck basks in the adoration, convinced victory is already his. Then he announces that the Emperor has personally sent an imperial court mage to support them. The mercenaries react in awe and fear as they realize the mage is Kegel of the Crimson Flame. A sinister female figure appears in a haze of purple power, immediately unsettling the crowd. She mocks them for mistaking her for an ordinary mage and says the idea is laughable. Revealing herself, she says she is an imperial court mage favored by the Emperor. She gives her name as Janina, an imperial court mage. The mercenaries are shocked to discover she is a snake beast man and admit they have never heard of her. Janina says that is only because she is not a mage who merely manipulates simple elements, but one who controls living weapons. The men repeat her words in alarm, struggling to grasp what living weapons means. Janina begins to manifest a strange, luminous weapon-like life form in her hands as proof of her power. With a predatory smile, Janina confirms that she indeed commands living weapons. A sudden, violent disturbance makes nearby soldiers recoil before they can understand what is coming. The shock deepens as something massive crashes into the scene with overwhelming force. Men look up in terror, realizing the threat is far beyond anything they expected. A hooded red-haired mage calmly reveals a towering troll at her side, turning panic into certainty. She proudly presents the monster as an ally who will fight beside her cause. Her faction declares that the next day will be the moment they crush Marcel's second subjugation force. Their leader whips the crowd into a frenzy by promising Marcel itself as an offering to the Emperor. He pushes the pledge further, vowing to deliver the city all the way up to the Emperor's throne. The gathered men answer with fanatical cheers for the Emperor and the Holy Empire. The chant swells into a mass roar as the army commits itself to the imperial cause. Elsewhere, Johann sits in silence, troubled by what he has learned and what may be coming. A young attendant named Godin answers his summons with nervous obedience. Johann hands him a sealed letter for city magistrate Velako and orders absolute secrecy. He stresses that the contents are important enough that Velako must personally verify them. After sending the message, Johann calls Goran and Can to join him. The old mage Eifel River presses Johann on why he is trying so hard to save that night. He sharpens the question by asking what Johann truly hopes to accomplish through that night. On the day of departure, the second Marcel subjugation force assembles before the city gate. The army completes its final preparations and forms up to march against the bandits. A hooded imperial soldier offers a prayer, framing the campaign as righteous and divinely supported. Johann rides out with the force, outwardly composed as the operation begins. Someone calls to him, drawing his attention before the march fully carries him away. Godin wishes him luck, and Johann entrusts Svetlga to the boy's care while he is gone. Eifel dismisses concern for himself, and reminds the child that he has endured many such campaigns. Johann waves farewell and sets off down the road. He rides on among the moving troops as the column leaves Marcel behind. Captain Kummel greets Johann at the front and confirms he is ready as well. A signal is given to begin the advance in earnest. Kummel raises his voice and orders the entire force forward. Just as the command is issued, a new disturbance interrupts the smooth start of the march. A detachment of elven knights in purple surges in at speed, cutting across the operation with authority. They arrive from ahead of the column after clearing the route before the main force. Johann immediately understands that Kummel's unusual command authority came from these elves. Kummel demands the order be repeated properly, forcing the bugler to comply under pressure. The advance command is sounded again, now under the weight of elven oversight. Back in Marcel, a catered aide approaches a dark elf official standing on a balcony with a letter in hand. She reports that the subjugation force has finally departed. The man is identified as Marcel's city magistrate, Velasco. Velasco notes that Johann sent a letter and immediately suspects it has already been examined. The aide confirms it was found the previous day in Baron Einbeck's room. Velasco finds the timing and location too convenient to accept at face value. He warns that with noble grudges entangled, the letter could easily be a planted deception. The aide counters that the seal undeniably belongs to House Einbeck. Velasco concedes the evidence points toward Einbeck's involvement but remains cautious. Even so, he admits the letter makes Einbeck appear to be behind the plot. The aide adds that Einbeck fled the city before he could be questioned, making suspicion seem even stronger. Velasco rejects that conclusion, saying he still does not trust the young knight and also distrusts the trading company's faith in him. The aide defends the company, insisting they only back people they judge worthy. Velasco lets the point pass but warns her to remember the consequences. If Johann's actions upset the city's balance, he says, the company will share the blame. He makes clear that Katana Trading Company will not escape responsibility if things go wrong. As Velasco thinks it through, a darker political possibility begins to take shape in his mind. He concludes that the hidden hand behind this may belong to the Pro-Emperor faction. At the Pro-Emperor camp, someone confronts Baron Einbeck and asks whether the report is true. Einbeck confirms it and says the messenger has just brought word. The faction leader gleefully declares that the second subjugation force has marched straight into their trap and that Marcel is nearly in the Emperor's grasp. Duke Mayhem and the Imperial Court Mage Janina celebrate, expecting victory to arrive on its own. Mayhem immediately fantasizes about indulging himself after taking Marcel, earning Janina's disgust. When Janina notices Einbeck turning pale, she asks what is wrong. Einbeck tries to hide his unease and tells them there is nothing to worry about. Yet his sweating eyes betray that he is suddenly terrified by a thought he cannot dismiss. He hesitantly asks Janina whether she has heard anything about Sir Karamov. Trying to sound casual, he asks if anything might have gone wrong on Karamov's expedition, even something as serious as an injury. Janina and Mayhem stare at him blankly, baffled by the absurdity of the question. Janina bursts out laughing at the idea that Karamov could be seriously hurt. She reminds him that Karamov is the Empire's greatest swordsman and is equipped with legendary gear. To her, that makes him a one-man pillar of imperial military power. She insists that for a man like Karamov to suffer such a setback is impossible, and Einbeck forces himself to agree. But inwardly Einbeck realizes Johann's story about Karamov was a lie and curses the dead lowborn he can no longer punish. On the road, Johann senses something off and begins to reassess the battlefield around him. Seeing the aftermath ahead, he remarks that Gustav's unit seems to have swept through the area cleanly. The scene appears to support that conclusion, with only burned corpses and scattered weapons left behind. An elven knight mocks the late-arriving dwarves and sneers at their slowness. Kummel snaps back that he is a dwarf, not an elf, refusing the insult outright. He reminds the elf that Johann is a noble and demands basic respect before things turn uglier. The elf answers with open contempt and threatens violence rather than courtesy. Johann watches the exchange and dryly notes to himself that elves and dwarves truly do not get along. He cuts the argument short, and Kummel grudgingly reins himself in. Johann questions the elves about whether there was fighting here and where the survivors went afterward. The elf proudly claims that Sir Gustav and the elven knights wiped the place clean. He adds that they are already leading the main force in pursuit of the remaining bandits. The fleeing bandits are shown racing through the forest while the pursuing knights close in, intent on slaughter and plunder. The elf insists that all loot and prisoners here belong solely to Gustav's side because the others arrived too late. Kummel dismisses the spoils as already paid for and instead fumes at the elf's repeated racial slur. Johann falls silent as the details stop fitting together in his mind. He realizes the bandits once destroyed a 500-man mercenary force, yet here they seem to have been routed too easily and without costing the elves a single casualty. His suspicion sharpens into certainty as he studies the field more closely. The forest to the right suddenly stands out to him as ideal ground for an ambush. When Johann asks whether the elves searched that forest, the knight only mocks him instead of answering. Johann concludes the retreat was staged to lure the pursuers deeper into prepared terrain. From above, the whole battlefield reveals itself to him as a trap waiting to spring. Kummel immediately believes him and orders the bugler to keep the force moving so they do not blunder in blindly. Johann urgently stops him before the column can march into danger. He orders the unit into a defensive formation at once and commands all shooters to concentrate fire into the forest. Kummel hesitates, worried that attacking empty woods will make them look foolish if Johann is wrong. Johann argues that if enemies are hidden there, the terrain gives them a deadly advantage and must be tested first. Even then Kummel points out that they are only supposed to be facing bandits, and should be able to crush them. Johann rejects that thinking, reminding him that these enemies annihilated the famed oak tree mercenaries and cannot be treated as ordinary thieves. He insists they must confirm the forest before the main force advances any farther. The elf derides Johann's caution as nonsense, while Kummel grimly weighs the risk. Kummel warns that if they unleash firepower for nothing, the elves will humiliate them as cowards and Johann's honor will suffer too. Johann answers that he will throw away his honor as many times as necessary if it saves lives. That resolve finally breaks Kummel's resistance. He bows to Johann's judgment and agrees to follow his decision. Johann feels relief, remembering how hard it was to persuade anyone the first time and recognizing that his noble status finally made the difference. He bitterly notes to himself that this world really is ruled by class and rank. Kummel bellows the new orders, putting the troops into defensive formation and readying the shooters. The dwarven soldiers rapidly lock shields and reposition into a protective line. Heavy shields slam into place, sealing the front against an expected strike. Archers and gunners are directed to fire into both forested flanks. The mortar crews are told to take aim as well, preparing a full probing barrage. The order to fire is given, and the first volley tears toward the trees. Projectiles rain into the forest, shredding branches and smashing into hidden positions. The bombardment strikes armored figures concealed in the woods, exposing that enemies were indeed waiting there. The elven knights stare in shock as Johann's warning is proven true. Kummel is stunned that there really was an ambush, and his thoughts jump to what that means. The hidden attackers are revealed not as bandits at all but as heavily armored bull-headed warriors. Johann's mind flashes back to the letter and the name he had already begun to suspect. When he asks about the bullhead mercenaries, his companions confirm they are infamous even among mercenary companies. They explain that an all-elf group called the Wolves of Akaton is famous, yet the bullheads are said to be even more expensive. Johann presses them to tell him everything they know about this force. He learns that despite their reputation, they are strangely secretive, charge enormous fees, and refuse ordinary jobs. From the little that is known, their battlefield style resembles a herd of enraged bulls. They specialize in smashing straight through the center of a formation and collapsing an army from within. Johann recognizes the logic as a kind of penetration warfare and understands how dangerous it is. When asked if they will face them the next day, he answers yes without hesitation. He reveals that tomorrow's enemy will not be thieves at all but the Emperor's elite mercenaries. The veteran advises Johann that if they encounter them, retreat is the only sane choice. He adds one absolute rule: never meet them in a head-on clash. When Johann asks why, the answer is blunt that no one can survive such a direct fight. The rumor says the bullheads can even command a minotaur. Johann recalls hearing of such a creature long ago, the memory returning with dread. The name of that monster comes back to him, the hero-slayer Minotaur. He remembers it as a gigantic, intelligent beast that butchered countless warriors and knights who challenged it. Ken tries to laugh off the fear and promises not to worry. Instead, he vows that he and Goran will risk their lives to cover Johann's retreat if the worst happens, asking payment only if they survive. Johann's expression softens at their loyalty. He admits he had intended to ask for their help anyway. Ken eagerly says they wanted to see the bull-headed monsters for themselves, even if only briefly before running. Johann thanks Goran and Ken but says he needs something different from them. The two men are surprised and wait for his real request. Back in the present, hidden watchers in the forest realize the Marcel force is hesitating and changing formation, suggesting their trap may have been noticed. Before they can react properly, incoming fire whistles overhead toward their concealed position. The barrage tears through the ambushers, killing men and beasts and forcing the hidden force to reveal itself. The bullhead mercenaries abandon concealment and order an immediate charge in response. Their leader stamps forward with crushing force, signaling the assault with absolute confidence. Armored bull-headed warriors emerge from the trees, their discipline and menace proving they are no mere rabble. Even under fire, one of them shrugs off arrows and keeps advancing, showing terrifying resilience. Another calmly adjusts his horned helm as if the barrage were only an annoyance. Then the bullhead mercenaries surge out of the forest in full force, driving the battle into open war. The battle opens with artillery fire as defenders launch explosives to blunt an oncoming assault. Through smoke and flames, the bullhead mercenaries keep advancing instead of breaking. Their hoof charge pounds forward with relentless discipline. They close ranks at the front, preparing to crash into the enemy line. Their hulking captain, Numeros, leads from the center with absolute confidence. Roaring for blood, Numeros raises his axe and drives the charge harder. The horned mercenaries surge behind him like an armored wedge. From above, the battlefield reveals the bullheads about to smash into the red iron line while one rider breaks out alone. A dwarf officer realizes in alarm that the attackers are the infamous bullhead mercenaries. Johann sees their preparations have still devolved into a direct collision and decides he has to intervene himself. The dwarf captain warns that the enemy will charge straight into them and tells Captain Kummel to brace. Johann vows to disrupt the charging formation somehow. The dwarf protests that Johann going alone is far too dangerous. Johann ignores the warning and spurs his horse forward. Left behind, the dwarf bellows for everyone to listen. He rallies the red iron mercenaries by declaring that the bullheads are merely testing their strength. Johann races toward the enemy convinced they will soon learn their gear is not invincible. The bullheads mock the lone knight's approach and assume one man cannot threaten them. Seeing Johann charge alone, they decide to kill him without hesitation. Johann answers with a brutal opening strike that instantly tears through the first attacker. He plunges into their ranks so violently that weapons and bodies fly apart, shocking the formation. The bullheads panic and shout for everyone to hold formation. Their officers realize Johann is deliberately trying to shatter their breakthrough wedge and order it maintained. Johann notices they understood his plan before he could fully collapse their charge. Behind him, the dwarf captain curses and rushes to support the opening Johann created. The bullheads refocus on the shield wall ahead and order a full breakthrough. Johann looks back and sees the two armies finally colliding. The dwarf captain answers the impact with a savage order to crack the attackers' skulls. A bullhead swings into the melee at close quarters. The enemy wedge punches through the red iron line, and the defenders cry out that their formation has been pierced. Bullheads pour into the gap and urge the defenders to die with honor as they press deeper. The breach turns into a chaotic brawl of axes, hammers, and shields. One bullhead stares in stunned disbelief as the fight turns against him. The dwarf captain charges personally into the breach with a furious war cry. He smashes into a bullhead at full force and halts the enemy's momentum. His hammer caves in another attacker with a crushing upward blow. A bullhead drops dead in front of the defenders, breaking their intimidation. The surrounding mercenaries freeze for a moment, shaken by the sudden reversal. The dwarf captain roars for his warriors to follow him. He ignites the runes on his paired hammers, turning them into blazing weapons. He exhorts his men to drench those burning weapons in enemy blood. Far off, Johann notices the dwarves have stabilized that side and no longer need him there. With that flank secured, he turns his attention back to the main clash ahead. He commits himself to the central head-on battle instead. His horse accelerates again as he charges toward Numeros. The bullheads spot another knight rushing in and raise the alarm. They are outraged that anyone would dare challenge Numeros directly. Johann is identified as the same knight who had already attacked their formation, and they dismiss him as a deluded fool. A subordinate begs Numeros for permission to personally kill Johann. Numeros grants the request without concern. The subordinate is introduced as a squad leader under Numeros, proud and eager to prove himself. With Numeros's approval, the squad leader leads a small unit to tear Johann apart. Johann cuts into the squad leader's face before the man can even properly engage. He follows with another flashing strike that batters the man's helmet aside. A third blow lands immediately after, finishing the exchange before it begins. The squad leader collapses almost instantly, leaving the bullhead stunned by how quickly he was eliminated. Johann reins in before Numeros and the remaining mercenaries, now facing them directly. Even in the middle of battle, Johann is distracted by the absurd realization that minotaurs really do exist. He recalls hearing rumors from Can and realizes they were true after all. Then he bluntly asks whether Numeros is the captain of these mercenaries. Numeros answers by telling Johann to get off his horse. Johann is caught off guard by the strange demand. Numeros explains that he does not want the horse injured when he cuts Johann apart. He even admires the animal and tells Johann to dismount, while his men greedily call dibs on Johann's gear. Johann agrees because he also wants to keep the horse safe, revealing it was named after his brother. Then he adds that if he wins, he will make stew out of Numeros's tail. He steps forward and openly invites Numeros to come at him. Numeros is briefly baffled by Johann's bizarre insult. Johann points at him with a smug challenge. The duel begins with a sudden explosive rush. Numeros charges first, bellowing as he swings his massive axe. Johann darts aside at the last instant, narrowly avoiding the sweeping strike. He flips and lands low to reset his footing. Numeros pivots with surprising speed and keeps the pressure on. Johann crouches and studies him, searching for a way through the monster's reach. Numeros raises his axe overhead for a crushing vertical blow. Johann braces and channels power into a defensive movement. He slips away from the impact as the axe smashes the ground and tears up the earth. Johann realizes the difference in reach is overwhelming and that even a graze would be fatal. Numeros whips up another huge circular attack that threatens the entire space around him. Johann sees too late that one clean hit would split him in half. He schemes along the edge of the attack, barely staying outside its killing arc. Frustrated, he wonders if he should have brought a different weapon better suited for this fight. Numeros taunts him for only dodging and demands a proper fight. Promising Johann a knightly death, Numeros launches another merciless swing. Johann suddenly spots a fleeting opening in the monster's movement. Numeros notices Johann's intent a fraction too late. Johann commits to a precise counter-strike with all his force. The blow lands squarely on Numeros's face. Instead of killing him, it only shatters one of the decorative horn pieces on his helmet. The surrounding bullheads recoil in horror at the insult to their symbol. Numeros himself freezes, trembling with rage and disbelief. Johann's weapon drops from the rebound after the imperfect hit. Numeros staggers back, humiliated and seething. Johann circles behind him, ready to continue while Numeros tries to recover. Johann raises his weapon for the finishing strike and declares it is time to end this. Elsewhere, the dwarf captain orders his men to break the bullheads' iron horns and press them in close where their advantages shrink. The red iron mercenaries answer by swarming the horned warriors with brute force. At another front, hooded holy knights prepare to enter battle after a grim prayer for forgiveness. They drink a blue potion as part of their ritual. The bullheads notice the newcomers and wonder who they are. Someone recognizes them in terror as holy knights from St. Galanto Monastery. The holy knights immediately go berserk and carve into the bullheads with unnatural ferocity. Their blades slash through armored enemies in a blur of blood and steel. One glowing-eyed knight fixes on a target with cold focus. A bullhead leaps down to crush that crazed holy knight. Before the blow can land, the attacker is cut across the body. A silver-haired female holy knight intercepts him with a savage strike. She spins through the melee and cuts down more bullheads in passing. Smiling almost gently, she tells a fallen brother to rise because people still need his help. The hooded knight answers with fanatical devotion, treating screams and blood as sacred signs that the light is with them. Meanwhile, the bullheads try to steady themselves by insisting they must not retreat. They cling to the belief that Lord Numerose will crush Johann and return to save them. At that very moment, Numerose's helmet is struck and torn away. Johann's weapon hovers over the now exposed face of his defeated opponent. Numerose lies on the ground choking and panicking under Johann's shadow. Johann asks if the so-called Hero Slayer has any last words before dying. Instead of boasting, Numerose weakly repeats the title as if it no longer belongs to him. The surrounding mercenaries fall silent, waiting to see whether Johann will kill him. Numerose drops all pride, apologizes for his insults, begs for his life, and is met only with Johann's stewed joke about the tale. Desperate, Numerose argues that killing him would bring Johann no honor. He reveals the reason is that he is not a true Minotaur at all. Johann is thrown by the confession and asks what he means. Numerose admits he is only a half-Minotaur, inferior to purebloods in both strength and intellect, so slaying him would not count as a worthy feat. Johann can only stare, unable to process the logic. He finally says he has no idea what achievement Numerose is even talking about. Turning away from the nonsense, Johann calls for the enemy bugler. He orders the bugler to inform the forces ahead of what happened here. Johann commands him to tell them plainly that they have been defeated, and the terrified man agrees. Numerose realizes the situation is hopeless. Johann then singles out the half-Minotaur and says he needs him to witness something. With sudden intensity, Johann demands that he tell only the truth. Numerose, confused and broken, can only answer with a weak, bewildered sound. The bugle call spreads through the battlefield, and bullheads reassure each other that Numerose must be coming soon. Then the unfamiliar signal makes them stop and listen in alarm. As the meaning sinks in, they cannot believe their captain of the 100 lost to a single knight. The dwarf captain seizes the moment, and mocks them for being crushed by Johann. He orders the victory call sounded, declaring this the first victory of the battle for their side. Far from the battlefield, the scene shifts to the Katana Trading Company's Marcel branch. Inside, a messenger reports to the city magistrate that the suppression force has won its first victory. The magistrate calmly says he already heard and praises the Bartok elf knights for their work. But the Catered Aide adds that contact with those elf knights has been lost. That news jolts the magistrate out of his composure. He struggles to understand how elite elf knights could vanish against mere bandits. The aide explains that would be impossible against ordinary bandits, but Johann had warned they were a disguised mercenary group. She places a newly arrived report on the desk. She urges the magistrate to read the document immediately. The report states that the bullhead mercenaries confessed everything and named the Baron of Ainbeck as the one who set the plot in motion. Reading that, the magistrate falls into grim silence. As he begins to identify the captain of the bullhead mercenaries, the aide innocently asks whether he means that Minotaur. Realizing that the accused surrendered alive, the dark-skinned elf concludes that someone managed an almost impossible capture. That implication strikes him as absurd, and he struggles to imagine who could have accomplished it. His companion calmly insists that someone truly did pull off that impossible feat, leaving him startled and demanding an explanation. The answer points to a lone battered swordsman standing before a mass of kneeling warriors, revealing him as the person capable of forcing such a surrender.